Welcome in, everybody. Another day, another episode of the Full Court Trap Pod. I am your host, Luke Tackett, here. Joined with me, as usual, is my main man, Blake Recruit Zone Smith. Blake, how we doing on this Friday evening?
I'm doing all right. Just put in some minutes on Fortnite OG to relax myself after a big day at college. What about you, though?
Yes, sir. Just clocked out of the daytime shift, and now we're ready to strictly talk ball for the rest of the evening. Had a lot going on. Blake, what was your first landing spot on the Fortnite OG map?
I think it was Fatal because that was
Fatal.
like my go-to back in the days.
Valid. Yeah, a little non-basketball question there. Derb, I see you down there. Well, you're down there on my camera at least. How you feeling after your Full Court Trap Pod debut on Monday night? Was that recording?
Feeling pretty good, I suppose. Could have been a little bit better. Could have been worse. I feel like the game overall solid performance. Ready to learn from it, refine a little bit, and be better today. Talk ball.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Getting back to work. Shout out Mark Stoops as he currently works to take down my football program.
Hey, no, listen. They always say leave stuff how you found it. He's on a great pace.
He's on a great pace. That is very true. But yeah, Derb, we're excited to have you here. And while we're on the subject of new members, we got yet another new member of the Full Court Trap Pod team here making his debut. Jake Roll, live in the flesh. We've known Jake for a long time. We're excited to get on here and talk some ball with him. Jake, how you feeling, my man? What do you want to tell the people about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. I hope y'all are doing good too. I know y'all are actually, but man, I don't got much to say. I'm just ready to get on here and get started. Have some fun.
As the wise Jack Sullivan said, we know ball, easy as that.
Pretty simple.
Speaking of Jack Sullivan, you can see he is missing. I would assume he's probably fighting Chicago traffic again, so prayers out to Jack. Daniel Fowl will hopefully be rejoining us sometime in the near future. He's got a lot going on right now with college and other things, but we've got a lot to discuss. Yes, career opportunities. Very eloquently put, Derb. But we've got a lot going on here on the Full Court Trap Pod that we got to get into, and we're going to start with what I would say is probably the biggest headline, or maybe second biggest headline of the midweek slate. Kansas, the number one team in the country, takes their first L of the season on the road in Omaha against the Creighton Blue Jays. That was a result that I would say none of us expected. We all struck out on that one on the preview pod. I don't even really think we spent a whole lot of time covering it, to be honest with you, because we didn't think this would be much of a battle. But we thought that teams had figured out Ryan Kalkbrenner. We were wrong. We didn't believe in Pop Isaacs. We were also wrong on that. He dropped 27 and was 10 for 15. But very solid performance from the Blue Jays to take down the Jayhawks. Blake, I know that we were all tuned into this one, had our eyes glued to our TV. What do you think about this shocking result in the early season?
To be flat out honest with you, I think that was a complete shit show by Kansas. They came out and shot like 36% from the field, 25 of 70 against a Creighton team who was once ranked, but then they kind of fell off a cliff there for a bit. But I mean, that's just unexcusable. Like, you can't really put it any way, really, and say that was a good outing by Kansas. DeJuan Harris, he's been in college for, it feels like 10 years now. He came out and shot 6 of 21 from the field against the offense, type point guard, Pop Isaacs. And that's just unexcusable. And then you got A.J. Storr and Zeke Mayo also putting up bricks and making a brick house. Like, that can't happen. Hunter Dickinson absolutely got shut down. Played 25 minutes, only had 6 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists. I mean, come on, Hunter Dickinson. You've also been in college for what feels like 20 years. What are you doing? I get Kalkbrenner is like a National Player of the Year candidate, but, I mean, you can't go on the road and play that bad as a team. Like, that just can't happen as the number one team in the country.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I think one of the bigger matchups coming into this game was obviously Kalkbrenner versus Dickinson, and Kalkbrenner definitely won that matchup. He had 17 and 10, played 38 minutes, while Dickinson only had 6 and 8, and played 25 minutes on the game. But we talked about it when we were going through Creighton's struggles last week. Stephen Ashworth, he means a lot to that team because he played 38 minutes, had 17 to go along with the performance of Isaacs and Kalkbrenner. So obviously Ashworth is a key part to that team moving forward, and you saw his value on the floor that night because they looked like a completely different team with him out there. And Derb, I'll turn to you. What do you think about this performance from the Blue Jays, and what stood out to you on the night?
Well, obviously, we all expected Kansas to win, and I did too. But like one thing I will go back to that I did talk about, Kansas just hadn't impressed me yet going into the year. They were what I called an on-paper team. They've got a bunch of guys that on paper they should beat beat everyone by 30, but they've just not done that on the court.
Mm-hmm.
And is that Kansas? Who else Kansas played so far?
They've played
Duke. They beat them.
Duke, Michigan State in the Champions Classic, and
Michigan State.
off the top of my head, that's all that I can really think of. North Carolina, but we're gonna have a discussion about them later.
Oh yeah, we'll get to them. Well, just my thing is so Kansas plays some teams with the pulse, right? They've had some decent comps so far, but every single one of them, for the most part, stuck with them. And when you're a team that went out and spent as much money as Kansas did on all the big names they did, you need to be better than what they are. I think it's just as simple as it is.
I also think something underrated factor in this game for Kansas, having DeJuan Harris Jr. as your leading scorer at 15, that's not a recipe for success at all, whether it be regular season basketball or tournament basketball.
No. DeJuan Harris is the only player to play 6 years and not get better than one of them. He's the same player he was 5 years ago.
Derb's coming out slinging at DeJuan Harris Jr. That's a national championship point guard, Derb. Come on now.
Yeah, the only good game he's ever had versus Kentucky like 2 years ago.
Fair enough. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of what you saw out of Kansas. That's kind of the recipe for how you beat them. You shut down Dickinson and you force the other players around them like Storr and Mayo and Harris to beat you. But last but not least, Jake, what did you think about this? You get to catch much of this game?
Yeah, well, the thing about Kansas is even when you go back to like last year, the supporting cast was nothing outside of Hunter Dickinson and sometimes DeJuan Harris. And so if you just look at this game, Hunter Dickinson took 4 shots from the field, 6 points, 8 rebounds. I mean, for Hunter Dickinson, that's basically a non-factor game. Like, if we're thinking about it, he's a National Player of the Year candidate in his 5th year, and you're putting up 6 points on the road. And not to mention, DeJuan Harris puts up 21 shots. I mean, I don't think Kansas is ever going to win a game where Hunter Dickinson takes 4 shots and DeJuan Harris takes 21. I mean, that's just a spell for disaster right from the get. I mean, you could probably credit Ryan Kalkbrenner for that. He's one of the premier defenders at the big man spot. But I mean, if you're Kansas, I mean, it just feels like you still have that spell that like you can just get nothing from your outside cast outside of Dickinson, and if you don't, you're just gonna lose, and that's what it feels like happened, and that's why they got blown out. But I mean, they were missing Rylan Griffin, so we'll give them a little bit of leeway. That's one of their better shooters. Bob Isaacs had a really good game, 10 for 15 from the field. I can't believe Stephen Ashworth played 38 minutes right back from injury, though. That's
a gutsy performance from him.
Yeah, some people didn't expect him to play very much, but
he came back way quicker than he was supposed to as well. Like he was supposed to miss weeks, and he missed like 1 game, or something.
I think it was 2.
Yeah, something like it was way less than expected.
Yeah. I'd also like to point out, when Hunter Dickinson has what Jake called a non-factor night, you kind of want to see more out of guys like KJ Adams and Flory Badunga. And we've shown a lot of love to Flory on this pod because he's a very talented freshman and he's going to do good things at Kansas. But you can't, when your main guy's struggling like that, come in and only contribute 2 points and 5 boards. Like, that's just kind of a lackluster effort on his part. And KJ Adams, not much better, 4 and 5 for him. But, yeah, I mean, are we concerned about Kansas, or is this kind of just, a one-off where Hunter Dickinson lost his one-on-one matchup that he really needed to take over and win? And are they going to grow as a team from that? Jake, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this.
I'll say that I'm not worried yet. We're 8 games in. That's playing on the road is tough. Creighton has a tough home court advantage. So I'm not worried about this loss specifically. What I am worried about is that you went out and got who might have been the number 1 transfer in the portal, AJ Store, and he's not giving you what you expected when you went out and got him. Not even averaging double figures in the season. I mean, he's shooting well from the 3 at least, but I feel like if they really want to do what they're trying to do this season and what they had hopes for, AJ Store needs to be better than he's been. But
Yeah, and
man, I just don't know.
I think too, AJ Store, he may have only been starting this game because of the absence of Rylan Griffin. I know that so
Yeah.
far this season he's been kind of like a 6-man type of role, and Rylan Griffin's kind of been the third piece to that backcourt going into the front court. But yeah, and then another concern, I guess you could say, like Derb said, where this is an on-paper team and they've got all the depth. Like overall, beyond Flory Badunga, who we highlighted off the bench, you got nothing out of your bench guys. I mean,
Yeah.
guys like David Coyd, he only had 8 points on the game, and he's one of their more valued pieces off the bench. And I think the loss of Rylan Griffin did hurt, but Derb, what do you think? What is your concern level for Kansas right now? I mean, I know you said you weren't super high on them and called them the on-paper team, but is this something that's going to become a trend as the season goes on? Like if Dickinson's just off, they're going to be off as a whole, or are we not too worried about them just yet?
I mean, they're going to be good. You know, they do have the players. Bill Self's a good coach. You know, they're going to win games, and you know they're at least a team. You pretty much lock them in for at least a Sweet 16.
Mm-hmm.
But my thing is, I've never been a big Hunter Dickinson guy, and I just feel like when you really put him in there against another elite big man, he's not very athletically gifted, I guess is the best way to put it. So when you have somebody that's able to, you know, kind of stand with him, I feel like he has a tendency to become a non-factor in games like that. So in my opinion, that's Kansas's biggest concern and worry is like that. Like if Hunter Dickinson isn't the engine that's moving the train, they're done because nobody else had the ability to pick up that slack so far.
Yeah, for sure. Blake, you kind of agree with what Derb's saying here? Or do you think there might be more to this team than just Dickinson and that it's a matter of guys stepping up that had a bad night against Creighton and it won't be much of a theme moving forward?
I mean, it's definitely like a bench type of thing or ordeal. Like David Coy, Zach Clements, Rakese Passmore, and Flory Badunga. Those guys have to produce some kind of like stats. Like you got to give or get points from the bench. You can't just rely on 5 guys in a 40-minute game and expect to like win against quality teams. Like I also think Hunter Dickinson, like against like length, he does struggle, like Derb said. So I mean that could be scary against teams that have length and forces like his teammates to like get scoring opportunities. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, even beyond like the bench, as you stated, Blake, like guys like Store and Zeke Mayo, I don't think we're hitting on them hard enough. I mean, they were not efficient at all in this game. Like we mentioned that they didn't produce, but 4 for 13 and 5 for 13 for them both respectively. That's not great. And then we hinted at DeJuan Harris, where he was the lead scorer, but he shot 6 for 21.
Yeah.
That's like Hall of Fame shot chucking level.
I just want to know what went on for him to shoot 21 shots. Like you're not a scorer.
No, he's
21
a natural.
shots.
He's kind of like a natural playmaker. That's kind of been his role on Kansas. He's the guy that stirs the pot. He gets the offense flowing, and like I said to lead this off, if he's going to be your main guy moving forward, then this Kansas team is going to plummet
Just
even
wrap
more.
it up. Wrap it
Yeah,
up.
just wrap it up. Derb, what are you going to say there?
I was just gonna kind of harp on that a little bit more. You know, obviously, DeJuan Harris is not a bad player, but he's not an offensive player. So when you have somebody like Hunter Dickinson having a bad night, and then you have DeJuan Harris out there on the same court, you've got 2 non-factors out there on the offensive end. You basically got 3v5 going out there on the offensive end, and that's just not a recipe to win games.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I'm long term. I'm not super concerned about Kansas because I mean the depth and the talent is there, and when you got a guy that's like Bill Self, where his resume speaks for itself, he's going to figure something out. If teams continue to stunt Hunter Dickinson and kind of stop what he wants to do, I've got confidence that Bill Self's going to find a way around that. But
Yeah,
while we are on the go ahead, Derb, before we move on.
I was just gonna say. I mean, as far as winning games, I wouldn't be concerned because I mean they're gonna win games. They're just gonna be better than some people. But
Yeah.
I'm not sure how high that ceiling really is right now.
Yeah. I guess the best way to sum it up for them right now is they're kind of like a high floor team, but they also have a low ceiling. Like just because of the amount of depth and the experience they've got there, they're gonna be like a stable team. But as far as like they can go, like we're talking second weekend and beyond in March, maybe like I don't know, I would set the expectation for them right now as a Sweet 16 team, maybe or Elite Eight. And going into the season, I was high on them. I was saying Final Four or bust, but I'm slightly concerned. I still think that if they figure things out, they could be Final Four caliber. But Blake, I'd be interested in what you think on that. What are you thinking about? Not even like in terms of just the regular season, like postseason wise. Do we think that this team still has it in them to make a deep run in the tournament?
I mean, I definitely think they do have like Final Four, natty type of potential. I mean, they pick like literally one of their worst nights of the season, like to have a bad shooting game. And then I also think Rylan Griffin being out with the flu kind of attributes to that like awful shooting performance. I definitely don't think if Griffin was playing that Harris would be chucking up 21 shots.
No.
Like there's absolutely no way he would. Even with like Storr, Zeke Mayo, Hoyt coming off the bench, and then Dickinson, I still don't understand how he got 21 shots put up.
Yeah.
You know what I don't understand?
What you don't understand?
Why didn't he just watch the flu game highlights and lock in like that and go out there? I mean, this could have been a legacy moment for him.
I don't know. I don't know if Rylan Griffin has that kind of dog in him. He's a very talented player, but I don't know if I'd go to those lengths. But I guess that kind of puts the bow on Kansas for now. But they weren't the only top 5 team that went down to a ranked opponent this week. The day before that Kansas matchup on Tuesday, we had the Kentucky Wildcats, my Kentucky Wildcats, and as you all can see, Jake Roll's Kentucky Wildcats. We took our first L of the Pope era on Tuesday. Final score 70-66 on the road at Little John Arena in Clemson. The easiest way to sum this game up for UK, I mean, you have arguably the worst shooting night that you could have dreamt up going into this game. I mean, I think it was 6 for 24 maybe from 3, or let me look at the box score here. 7 for 27.
I think it was like 7 for something because Lamont
Yeah.
Butler hit one there at the end.
Yeah, I just pulled it up. It's 7 for 27. But I mean, as far as this game is concerned, I really don't even think it was Clemson necessarily creating the magic that you would expect in an upset like this. It was more so just how poorly Kentucky played. Like that, like I said, it's the worst shooting night of the season so far for them by far. You had Lamont Butler in foul trouble the whole game, and Kirk Kriisa, I mean, as much as I like the guy, he was basically doing cardio out there. He really couldn't provide much for him. And Lamont, I think he's kind of the piece that gets that offense going. But you got to give credit to Clemson. They slowed that game down. They made Kentucky operate in the half-court sets and not get that transition action going where Mark Pope likes to play at that rapid style kind of pace. But, yeah, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the performance by Jaden Zachary. He had 13, 5 for 12, and Ian, what's his last name again? Shefflin. Ian Shefflin. He was fucking horsing on Kentucky the whole night. 20
Looking
boards.
Like prime Oscar Sheboy out there.
I mean,
Dennis Rodman.
I thought Oscar Sheboy switched teams there for a second. 20 boards, and he didn't even do anything stellar offensively. He had 11.
He missed like 17 shots.
Yeah,
he was 4-20 from the field.
Very inefficient shooting wise, but yeah. Jake, I'll let you hit lead off on this one. What did you think was, I mean, I assume you're going to agree with me here, but what did you think was the cause of Kentucky's demise in this game?
Yeah, well, I mean, from the very get-go, Lamont Butler, foul trouble. I mean, they looked good when he was in there. They took like an early lead, like 7-2 or something. He gets 2 like ghost fouls. He's gone. He has to sit. Kirk Reese is a good dude, but right now he's not giving much. He's shooting under 25% from 3. That's like his thing, you know. If he's not shooting the ball well, you're not getting much from him. That's just the reality. Amari Williams still turning the ball over too much. 4 turnovers, 2 assists. Andrew Carr had his worst game of the season by far. 1 for 7 from the field, 5 points, 2 turnovers. He was in foul trouble early though too, so I don't think he could get into much of a rhythm. So
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the biggest thing was Lamont going into foul trouble. Like that just set the whole thing off course. And then he comes back. They start going on a run again. I mean, he had 16 and 5 in 19 minutes, and then he hurt his ankle too. So I mean, Lamont kept them in the game.
For
But
me personally, something I didn't understand, like the first really questionable call I think Pope has made as coach is when your team is struggling that bad from 3, why is Kobe Brea just sitting there rotting on the bench and only
Yeah.
playing 17 minutes? Like, that just didn't make much sense to me. Like,
Yeah.
he only took 2 attempts the whole game in a game where you're just dying to get a shot going and you need to see 3 start falling. But yeah, I mean, really, the night can just be summarized by poor offensive performance from Kentucky and Clemson. They did the nitty gritty on defense. They were going over every kind of ball screen imaginable. They were not letting the UK guys get any open space to get shots off. And
I know Pope's in postgame said that him and the staff went for defense and rebounding over the shooting that Brea brought. So that meant Otega and Jackson Robinson ultimately, but they're probably. I mean, I don't know if you could have gone wrong there. You make a decision and you live with it. Didn't work out for them, but at the same time, they got absolutely horsed on the board. So they had to try and do something. I mean, Shefflin 20 boards. That's like a prime Oscar game. Kentucky fans haven't seen rebounding like that since Oscar was in Lexington. So I mean,
no.
you didn't
And
get
we
much from
also-
Brandon Garrison either.
Yeah, we also mentioned on the pod prior, we were talking about Kentucky's potential as the season goes on. And one of the things that me, Blake, and Derb hit on was that the thing you'd like to see out of them was kind of some improved big man performances. You want to see Amari kind of continue to stabilize and kind of take control of the paint. And you want to see Andrew Carr keep playing at a good level. And those guys did not show out at all on Tuesday night. I mean, Carr, it felt like every time he got the ball, he was just doing his best Cooper Flagg, just starts spinning, and he doesn't have the raw talent that Cooper Flagg has to be doing all that. But Derb, what do you think? I know you caught this game. What was your overall takeaways of this, and what's Kentucky going to have to improve upon to get things going? Because they got a tough test tomorrow that we're going to hit on here in a little bit.
Honestly, Kentucky played just about as horrible as they could, especially shooting-wise. But really what just stood up to me is, every game, there's a couple have-to-have-it plays. And it felt like Clemson came up with about 90% of those. And I don't think it's our guys or, Kentucky having bad effort as much as it is. Just Clemson was just they was out there, they was ready for a fight. They were willing to go down swinging in there, and I think it showed up on the court. And the one thing I really would have liked to see more is, I'm going to sound like an unk right here when I say this, but I feel like down the stretch we shot way too many threes. I feel like we should have drove the basket significantly better. Because sometimes it's just not your night. You either got to get layups or free throws. And I just feel like we didn't do that near enough there at the end. Like Otega, as much as I love him, he's been great for Kentucky this year. I think he bricked like 3 wide open threes.
Yeah, he had one attempt. UK got the offensive rebound, got it back, and then missed. And that was at a moment in the game too where you really could have started to make some things happen and kind of find a way to come out on top with that. And it just didn't work out. I mean, Blake, I know you caught this game too. I feel like we're not really talking about what Clemson did well as much in this game, but I mean, they obviously did what they needed to win. And what was your biggest takeaway on the Clemson side of things, so we can make sure we give them their flowers?
Honestly, after that performance, I think they're a top 25 team in the country. Like, their defensive mentality is pretty wild to see. Like, they controlled that whole game start to finish. They slowed down the Mark Pope offense, which I think is honestly like one of the most beautiful things in basketball I've seen in like a long time. Jaden Zachary, he had a really good game, 13 points and 37 minutes. Ian Shefflin, absolute energy guy. He may have sucked from the field shooting wise, but that guy was all over the floor, diving for balls.
All grit and absolutely no offensive substance whatsoever.
That's true.
Kudos to him.
Then you had Chauncey Wiggins coming off. He just had 26 minutes of play, but had 12 points and was making shots that like almost looked like Kevin Durant-esque. Like, he was making some fadeaways that I was like, wow. And then Cade Hunter had a pretty awful night from the field, 2 of 8, but he still had 10 points from the field. So, I mean, kudos to the Tigers. And then I highlighted on the Kentucky side last episode about like one big issue they have right now, and I think that's turnovers still. I mean, they ended up having a decent amount of turnovers. I think it was like 12. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, you just can't have that happening. I get it's a road game. Clemson's like Super Bowl dang near. You just can't have that happening, though.
No, not at all. Would you all believe me if I told you that the rebounding margin in this game
was the
0?
Same, I think.
It was completely even.
Like 44 to 44, right?
It didn't feel that way at all.
It didn't. No, that's what I was getting to. Like, it didn't feel that way at all, because it just felt like Clemson had the hustle and the heart in this game to want to go out there and just take this game from Kentucky. And, I mean, when you're looking at the overall like outlook of this game, another thing too is Kentucky got nothing from their guys off the bench. Ainsley Almanor, he wasn't hitting anything. Brandon Garrison,
count your days.
Yeah, Kirk Risa, we mentioned him. He contributed a goose egg on the scoring board.
Doing Brandon his best Tony Snow impression. Yeah, like, that was awful.
Brandon Garrison just doing absolutely nothing. And, I mean, Kobe Brea, he was just sitting there on the sidelines all night, just waiting at the end of the bench for Mark Pope to call his number. I mean, I just really didn't understand that decision. I mean, maybe Pope saw something where he thought he could exploit, maybe, and it just wasn't Kobe's night in his opinion, but I just didn't agree with that decision. Derb, I know I was cutting you off, so go ahead.
No, you're good. You know how you know it's not Kentucky's night?
Mm-hmm.
Ainsley Almanor missed a corner 3.
Yeah.
Wide open.
He doesn't do that.
He's got Hall of Fame corner specialist to speak in
exactly.
2K terms.
I was about to say, you know it's not good when that's happening.
Yeah, no, not at all.
I don't think I've ever seen that man miss 2 in a row. If I've ever seen him miss one at all. And we couldn't buy a basket last night. Or not last night.
Tuesday night.
Tuesday night, yeah. My bad. Fog rain.
Mm-hmm.
They just couldn't buy a basket, and Clemson was physical as hell.
Yeah, 100%. Like, Clemson imposed their will.
To me was Zachary. He had a big layup late game. He drove his shoulder. I forgot who was guarding him. He drove a shoulder to their chest, and he just put it up and in. I mean, that was pretty much – that summed up the game about one player right there.
Mm-hmm. I kept saying to myself, too, when I was watching, Jake, you might agree with this, but it felt like if Kentucky could have just gotten maybe a 4 or 5 point cushion, that they would just roll from there, but they could never get out of that. Like, they'd make a run and they get within a couple points, and then bang, Clemson makes a play and extends. Or Kentucky got up 1 at one point in the second half, and I thought maybe this is the time that they get it rolling, and that just didn't happen. So I guess my biggest question is, like, what has to change for tomorrow when Kentucky goes and plays Gonzaga? We'll dive into the deeper part of that matchup here in a bit, but just at the surface level, what is the biggest thing you're wanting to see from Kentucky to improve upon?
Well, what I will say is I want them to I want Kentucky's best players to stay out of foul trouble, is what I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
Lamont Butler, Andrew Carr. I think in Duke and Clemson games now, it's been both of them. Like, the first half, they've had foul trouble. They've had to sit. and that leads to big runs for their team. But I will say against Clemson, Lamont Butler was cutting them up, but the foul trouble plus the ankle injury really ruined a lot of things. But man, against Gonzaga's like if you take Clemson and like amp it up by like 5 times. So
Yeah.
I mean, Lamont has to stay out of foul trouble. If he even plays, we have to consider
Yeah,
that.
that is true. They've been
Yeah.
kind of hinting at the fact that he might not play, and
Yeah.
I mean, no disrespect to Travis Perry, but if that's the guy that's going to be playing
could be
major
worse.
Yeah,
minutes,
it's just a disaster. He hasn't even played against like the mid majors, so
no.
I feel like Pope won't even put him in. He'll just have like Jackson run backup point guard duties, but whatever. Yeah, I just feel like in the Clemson game, whenever Kentucky had a run, it was either Zachary or Wiggins who just had an answer every time. I mean, Zachary hit a few big time threes. He had that and one that Derb was talking about. Wiggins had that bank shot at the buzzer. So
Mhm.
Clemson had everything going for them. They packed the arena for a big time matchup. They did what they had to do to win. So
Yeah, I mean, they definitely went out there and out physical Kentucky. They outworked Kentucky and
yeah,
deserved to win 100%. I mean, Kentucky just never looked comfortable the whole night. I hinted at it earlier, but on those off-ball screens, on-ball screens, Clemson was fighting to get over all of those and make sure none of Kentucky's shooters could get their space for a shot. And I think that Clemson, people were kind of laughing at Kentucky saying, oh, they lost to an unranked team, them and Auburn, the only SEC teams to lose in this SEC ACC challenge. But I think Clemson's a better team than people are giving them credit for. I mean, I kind of dunked on them earlier and said it felt like Kentucky just shot themselves out of the game and that Clemson didn't really do much besides just out hustling. But there's some players on that team, and I think that they could easily be a top 25 caliber team. Blake, you said that you agreed with that take that they should be in the top 25. And how do we think, with North Carolina not looking so hot and the ACC as a whole not looking so hot beyond like Duke, do we think Clemson might be fighting up there at the top with Duke rather than what I said in the preseason would be North Carolina?
Yeah,
yeah.
without
I
you
think they're
got it, Jake.
definitely.
You got it.
I think they're definitely. It's either them or Pitt for the number 2 spot behind Duke, and then whoever you want to flip flop there, Pitt and Clemson are 2 and 3. And then probably North Carolina after that, but North Carolina has not been up to par, so they're not deserving of being called the second best team in the ACC right now.
Yeah,
Sorry,
for
Blake.
sure.
Oh, you're good.
If I was going to say like one thing, I guess to kind of help wrap up the Kentucky section, or that
Mhm.
game, I'm fine with Amari Williams bringing the ball up the court, but the moment he's about to step into that 3-point line, please pass the ball. Instant turnover every time. He tries to do that little spin, and then the ball goes about 4 foot the opposite direction,
Mhm.
and then the other team's busting down on a fast break. You know how I said John Shire needs to ban Cooper Flagg from doing the spin the last 2 minutes of the game?
Yeah, Andrew Carter and Amari Williams need to be banned from that as well.
Yeah, agreed.
100%. Yeah. But before we move on, Blake, I mean, you started it off by saying Clemson's top 25 caliber. What do you think about them the rest of the way and how they're going to look once we get into the nitty gritty of the ACC schedule?
I think that home court advantage was cooking for them. I expect it to be like that all year against quality comp. I also think that like guys like Ian Shefflin, Cade Hunter, Jaden Zachary, Chauncey Wiggins, all those like that whole core, I think they're gonna shape up well against like some of the like what we thought coming into the season as like the top ACC teams. I think they shape up well against like UNC, especially UNC because like their bigs awful. We've talked about that a million times. Jalen Washington sucks. Uh, the Louisville transfer, and
Jalen
then
Withers.
Withers, and then Van Allen Lubin. Like those guys don't move the needle at all. And then the guards for them for UNC, they've also been super inconsistent. Like it's unreal how like wishy-washy those guards are. RJ Davis, you either have him absolutely having a spectacular night. You have Elliot Cadeau, who, man, I thought like highly of him coming into the year, but so far, I've not been impressed. And then Seth Trimble, he's one of those guys also who are either really good one night or just non-existent. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Clemson, they shape up well against them. Duke, though, I think Duke's got that even if they play on the road. Like, that team's just special this year, I believe.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to discuss UNC a little bit more, so we'll get into that once we start talking about that Alabama game they just had. And yeah, I mean, that kind of puts the bow on the Clemson and Kentucky thing. Before we do move on, though, Derb, I'd like to note you coined the term "we" when we were discussing Kentucky. You got anything you want to tell the people before we move on?
Yeah.
We've outed another Kentucky fan.
I outed myself on accident.
We got another.
I try to be objective, though. You
No,
know?
100%. We've always said, even before you got on board, this is a no bias podcast.
Yeah, no. And I said, we in my head. I thought, damn it.
It's okay. Dan Fowl did the exact same thing that you did. But we'll keep it rolling. Moving on, Kentucky's going to have a matchup we'll talk about here in a couple minutes. But the game of the week thus far, and I think we're all going to be in agreement on this, Auburn and Duke. Duke takes down Auburn, the number 2 team in the country, by 6 at Cameron Indoor. And, man, what a game this was. I mean, Isaiah Evans, welcome to the big show, my man. I mean, Shire was letting you sit there and rot on the bench the last couple of games. I mean, I don't know what he saw there, but he went absolutely nuclear. And, I mean, if he's not playing in this game, like he's just been sitting on the bench there the last couple of games, I don't think Duke wins this, to be completely honest with you. But Cooper Flagg, he did Cooper Flagg things, 22 and 11. Not the best shooting wise, 7 for 18. But he's getting his buckets, and you want to see a little bit more efficiency maybe from him. Conca-Nipple, he had a quiet night for the most part, only 6 points. And Tyrese Proctor with 12. And then Caleb Foster, he finally got things going with 11 off the bench. They took him out of the lineup and put in Zion James, and that kind of helped them out a bit. But, yeah, I mean, this was a really, really good game, just good basketball on both ends. We made an Instagram post this week about Tahad Pettiford dropping 20 off the bench. He was getting to his spots. He was firing on all cylinders, 8 for 15 on the night. Johni Broome doing his thing as usual, 20 and 12. But, I mean, overall takeaways from this game is these are 2 Final Four caliber teams, in my opinion. We've stated that Auburn could have a case for the best team in the country, and I know their competitor for that, Kansas, went down as well. But how are we feeling about this game, Derb? How are we feeling about the Blue Devils? I know that me and you, we went 3 for 3 on the predictions. We were the only ones that picked Duke in this game, so now's your chance to take a little victory lap. What were you feeling about this game?
Well, I called it. I hyped up Auburn a lot. I said I believe they were my number 1 going into it.
Mm-hmm.
And even so, I still said, I think Duke's going to edge us without. Because, they do have the talent. Something about Cameron Indoor is just special for some reason. Teams go there to die.
Yep.
Unless you're that one random team that gets the upset every single year. For no reason.
Stephen F. Austin in 2020, they somehow went in there and just took down Duke.
No, I just, like I said, I thought this game was going to be a big one. I was like, I think I remember saying, if it wasn't a dogfight going into the last, 4-5 minutes, whatever, I'd be surprised. And you know what it was? It was a dogfight in those last few minutes.
Nope.
And Duke was able to get those big baskets when they needed them. And honestly, Auburn was too sometimes. But it just, the good outweighed the bad for Duke, and it just kind of helped take them the rest of the way there.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, Auburn, they got out and jumped on them early, punched them in the mouth, got up by double digits. And I kind of thought, oh man, Auburn may just come in here and do this. But enter Isaiah Evans off the bench with the Stone Cold Steve Austin music. I mean, he came in there flame throwing, just would not miss. He started off 6 for 6, I believe, right, from 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he kind of cooled off and finished 6 for 8. But, man, I mean, I've said it already, but what in the world was Shire thinking leaving that guy on the bench, Blake?
It's kind of unreal. I mean, they've kind of struggled with outside, like perimeter shooting so far this year. And when you have a guy who can shoot threes like that efficiently, coming off the bench, and a guy that you didn't play at all, like that's unreal. And I think Evans was out there doing his best NBA Jam. Who's on fire impression? Like that was
Yes,
unreal,
sir.
dude.
I missed that game.
Yeah, we need that
was a
back
classic.
without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, he went in there and he made John Shire really think hard about these last couple of games where he was on the bench. And I mean, I think if you're Duke, this is kind of this type of game. It's what we said was going to have to carry them when they play tough opponents because, like in the Kansas game, when Cooper Flagg and Conkin-Nipple weren't at their best, you had Tyrese Proctor leading the way, and they come out on the losing end of that. And in a game like this where Coop goes for 22 and 10, and then you got another guy like Isaiah Evans be a spark, that's just, I think, where their bread and butter is going to be because their young talent is so elite. And Jake, I'm sure you probably agree with that sentiment. What do you think about this game?
John Shire leaving Isaiah Evans on the bench is like the equivalent of Calipari never bringing Rob Dillingham off the bench. You have an offensive flamethrower sitting there for you who can hit 6 threes and a half, and he didn't play a single minute versus Kansas, Kentucky, and Arizona. That feels like a little bit of coaching malpractice right there. But my other like thing here is, what else does Tahad Pettiford have to do to get the keys to the team? He goes off against Houston, goes off against Iowa State, goes off against Duke in Cameron. I don't know what he's only getting 18 minutes a game. I guess maybe a little bit of foul trouble there this game, but only 18 minutes, and he gave you 20. He's obviously your best option at point guard. Might have to take Denver Jones off the ball a little bit, but I mean, I just feel like you gotta just get this guy, and he's gotta be your go-to with the ball, man.
Yeah, and I was gonna say too, like Denver Jones, he's up there putting in cardio, dropping a goose egg on points.
Yeah, he didn't play good at all.
Yeah, and then Tahad Pettiford, like he's flamethrowing and getting everything he wants. Like I think that he's definitely made. We saw in this game 2 freshmen come off the bench and light it up and make their case. Like, hey, coach, like this is why you need to play me, and this is why I should be out there. So, do we think maybe moving forward that we will see a lineup change with both of these teams? Could we see Tahad Pettiford starting? Could we see Isaiah Evans starting? Or are they just going to keep being those spark plugs off the bench?
I don't know. I feel like Bruce Pearl just loves his upperclassmen, and Denver Jones was reliable for them last year. I don't know. JP Peggs is not giving you anything. Transfer from Furman. That's your other option at guard, but it is obviously Tahad or Denver Jones at this point. I feel like if you want to maximize your potential, it's got to be Tahad. Tahad is definitely the higher ceiling player, and I don't know. He's not getting the minutes, though, that look like it, so I don't know.
Yeah, no. And another Auburn guy that I've been really impressed with so far this season, Chad Baker-Mazara. He had a solid performance with 17, 2 for 2 from 3. He was making some tough shots in this game as well, and he was trying to get
his daily flagrant foul.
Yeah, no, that dude's a menace, 100%. He's out there just looking for something. But yeah, I mean, if we want to talk about disaster classes in this game, like Denver Jones, Dylan Cardwell, he put up 0 in that starting lineup. I'm not really moved by him being the counterpart to Johni Broome in that offense. Blake, I would imagine you probably agree with that take. Who did you think were some of the more underwhelming guys here that kind of let Auburn down?
I mean, you obviously just nailed it head on. Cardwell. I mean, Denver Jones averaging a little over 9 a year, put up a goose egg on only 4 shots, playing 28 minutes. Like, that's definitely a key or a big piece of disaster. Chris Moore, 2 points on only 3 shots. Chaney Johnson, 2 of 7. Don't know why he's shooting 7 shots, but I mean, hey, more power to you, I guess.
Yeah,
and then, I mean, JP Peggs.
JP Pegues, March Madness legend.
Only putting up like 2 points, I think it is.
Miles Kelly for Auburn has been really good.
Yeah, he's a really good shot maker.
Yeah, big time shot maker.
While we're on the subject of JP Pegues, I mean, they got him out of the portal from Furman thinking that he was going to be one of those mid-major gems, and he really hasn't shown much of anything yet. I mean, kudos to him. He's going to have that moment in March forever where he hit that game winner against Virginia, and that Kevin Harlan Pegues call, that's legendary. But Derb, I'm going to transition over to you, let you speak your piece here. What did you think about the overall performance, and what's Auburn going to build on moving forward?
You definitely got to let Pettiford play more. Like he's got to be. I feel like him and johni Broome are obviously the best 1-2 punch they got as far as his pure offensive power, and unless you're a prime Virginia, you can't win games not scoring points. And when you have guys that aren't performing the way you wanted them to, you got to give them that extra opportunity, or you got to give other guys the extra opportunity. Not bad. Like, kind of like similar to the Duke situation, like with Isaiah Evans, with him not playing. After that performance, you got to find a way to give him more minutes. You guys that are playing good, you have to let them play, because if you don't, you're doing a malpractice to not only yourself, but the rest of the team and them. So I think Bruce Pearl had to loosen the reins a little bit on the whole upperclassmen thing. Kind of like, why was KD Johnson playing so much there at one point? He wasn't good.
George Mason legend, KD Johnson.
He finally got ran out of town, and Auburn's better for it. So
yeah, 100%. And then transitioning sort of back to Duke before we move on from this. I mean, they obviously had a great performance. They shot the ball efficiently all night long. The only thing I was a little bit disappointed in, just because we haven't really spoken much as to what Duke didn't necessarily do well. Kaman Malawach, he really didn't do much of anything, and I was gassing him up so much in the preview, talking about how I thought he could give Broome some trouble and that he was going to be an intriguing matchup, but not really much of anything out of him, which didn't matter in the grand scheme of things because Coop and Isaiah Evans did their thing, and Proctor got you some buckets when you needed them the most. And yeah, I mean, the only concern I really have with this Duke team, and I'd be interested to get all your guys' thoughts on it, I truly think that John Shire could end up being part of what this team's demise is in the long run, because he's just I don't think he's necessarily a poor coach, but I don't think he's a great one either. I just think he's very average. And
you know who he reminds me of?
You're gonna say it, aren't you?
Ryan Day.
Ryan Day.
I thought you were Calipari.
I thought you were gonna either say Calipari or then I thought you'd say Ryan Day.
Ryan Day.
I didn't know we were switching sports.
No, it's just a very similar comparison, which albeit John Shire has been there a lot shorter period than Ryan Day's in Ohio State.
Yeah.
But he's had some solid teams, solid performances. But he was handing the keys to a Ferrari.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily sure that he's shown the ability to drive that vehicle yet.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think my biggest criticism out of him so far this year has obviously been the underutilization of Isaiah Evans, and then in that Kentucky Duke game and kind of the Kansas game as well, it just didn't seem like there was really a scheme for them to go out and win that game. It just kind of felt like, here's the ball, Coop, here's the ball, Con. You guys go make some magic happen. And we saw Cooper having the turnover issues against UK, and then Con, he had those against Kansas. But Blake, are we any level of concerned about Duke as far as the coaching goes? Do we think this could be a limiting factor to him, or do we need to let John Shire cook a little bit more before we make any judgments?
Honestly, I would just pump the brakes on the Shire hate. Well, not necessarily hate, but
criticism.
Criticism, yeah. I think that team's got a high ceiling, about as high ceiling as you can get. National championships, I think, is in the talks for this year right now. And I think Shire, he'll evolve as a head coach. I mean, I seriously don't think he's as bad of a coach as we've seen so far. And, yeah, I just think Shire's really hasn't really done as bad as we think. I mean, Evans is a big question mark, having him rot on the bench for how long he did, and obviously a couple mistakes in that Kentucky game late in the game that practically cost him it. But I mean, that's just how every coach is. I feel like even some of the great ones, like they struggle at first and then they evolve.
Yeah, we'll see. It's definitely going to be intriguing to see how this team progresses. Derb, what do you want to say before we move on?
Actually, this may be pure casualty on my part because I'm not paying much attention. But I swear I've not heard anything out of Colin Knippel in like 3 games.
Yeah, I was gonna
He's
say.
kind of gone quiet.
Yeah, since like the start of the season, he's kind of been up, down, up, down.
But better than Reed Shepherd, by the way.
Yeah. I was only gonna say he was getting like crazy hype preseason, like Reed Shepherd, underrated to high draft pick type hype. He hasn't really been that good in these big games, but also with Duke, Malik Brown. Okay, wait, hold on.
Yeah, we got a dog coming in. It's all right. But Malik Brown, yeah, I kind of get what Jake was saying here.
He had a huge putback there, though, in that game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, he's not really contributed much either. And, I mean, we'll see. Like, Con, I guess to kind of round things out, he's got the talent, obviously. And I think he's going to get a little bit more comfortable as he continues to go on. And he's had his struggles, but I think he's too good of a talent to count out right now.
Oh, yeah, no. I'm definitely not out on him yet by any means. It's just, everybody, he came out shooting like 75%. And everybody was, saying all these things about him, which albeit if he was on my team or something like that, or if I was a scout, I would be too. But it's just crazy that, these last couple games, he's hit a couple shots here and there, but really nothing else.
Yeah, no, and to move on to Duke's rival here in North Carolina, is it time to say that this team just stinks? Because they got routed on their home court by Alabama. They're 4-4 to start the season. We've talked about it. We said in the preview, we literally told the people what was going to happen. Jalen Washington and Jalen Withers and what was their other big man that played a lot in that game? Drake Powell. They're just not going to cut it against the top just interior talent in college basketball. And we saw that again because Cliff Omarumi, Grant Nelson, they did their thing. They held it down. Mark Sears, he got back to doing Mark Sears things a little bit, more of an efficient outing. But Nate Oates, he's cooking that down there in Tuscaloosa, I think. And, I mean, he's had the 2 losses, obviously, to Oregon and Purdue. But this team still looks very solid top to bottom. And they just went into North Carolina, which is a pretty hard place to play, a tough environment. And they took control of the game, and it just never really was much of a game, to be honest with you. They looked solid. They looked like the better team, and we all kind of saw that coming, I think, besides maybe Blake. Blake, didn't you pick North Carolina to win this one?
Yeah, I did. I had faith in Hubert.
I'll let you start. You can cut the promo on UNC for ruining your predictions.
Yeah, Hubert Davis, count your days, man. Like, You had 6 guys on Alabama drop double digits on you guys on your home floor. Like, what are you doing as a team? I get the bigs suck right now. They don't have, like, Armando Bacot's not coming back running through the door. Like, I get that. But you seriously cannot let Grant Nelson, Cliff Omarui, like, absolutely destroy your team. You can't have Mark Sears, granted he's a National Player of the Year candidate, struggled in the past like 3 or 4 games or so. You just can't have that happen on your home floor. Like, that's an embarrassment not only to Roy Williams, who's their coach before Hubert came in, but that's just a disgrace to how historical that program is.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, on the Alabama side of things, Aiden Holloway, he made the heel switch from Auburn to Alabama, and so far this move is working out good for him because he had 15 off the bench, and he's piecing together quality performances, averaging 9 on the year so far. Really, his only stinker performance that I can think of that at least I paid attention to was Rutgers, where he only had about 5. But in all their games against ranked opponents, he's had double digits, and that just goes to show the depth of this Alabama team, that you can have a guy come in off the bench and give you 15 on any given night. And I would look to him to continue to be a spark plug off the bench. And LeBaron Filion, I think
Phylon.
I'm butchering that
LeBaron
name.
Phylon, you're good.
Baron Phylon, yeah, he's pretty tough. I think he's going to be a star in Tuscaloosa as the season goes on.
Yeah, I think he might be a draft, like a lottery type of guy. I think we need to start talking about that. He's been nothing but consistent for that Alabama team. He just stepped up in a tough environment. And then can we talk about Ian Jackson too for UNC? Having 23 coming off the bench. Like, that's unreal. 10 to 17 from the floor. I remember he had like a pretty high jumping dunk like in the first half, I think. And I think he's going to be a big key in that UNC team if they have any expectations whatsoever at a March Madness run.
Yeah, no, we've been waiting for him to get it going, and he finally did on this night. 23, like you said, very impressive, and he was one of the top talents of this high school class. There were a lot of schools that wanted him, but I mean, I transitioned to the bigger story of this game. We know what Alabama is, but I think it's more so about what North Carolina isn't, because this, simply put, right now, this is not a good basketball team, and Jake, I'm pretty sure you agree with me on that, but do we think that things are going to get better for North Carolina, or is it just going to keep going downhill?
Yeah, I don't think North Carolina's problems are like fixable. They don't have a good front court at all. Like, I'm talking like bottom of like Power 4 in terms of how good their front court is, because I mean, Jalen Washington, he's a third-year player. He hasn't developed into what you wanted so far. They only gave him 12 minutes because he was struggling so bad. Then Allen Lubin, transfer from Vanderbilt. They struck out on Cliff Omoriui, among others, and so he was like a backup to the backup type of option. They picked him up, whatever. Ty Claude from Pitt. He's like undersized, but I mean, man, I don't know if North Carolina can overcome this, but you have a good backcourt. Like the backcourt can beat anyone. Let's be clear about that in good games, but you already don't have a front court, and when RJ Davis shoots 7 for 24 from the field, 1 for 11 from 3, Seth Trimble 4 for 13, Elliot Cadeau doesn't even give you a field goal, 1 point. Elliot Cadeau like looked totally checked out in the game against Alabama. I'm not sure what that was about. So I mean, it just looks like a totally unprepared team. Hubert Davis didn't get what they needed at all. They needed a big man after Armando was on his way out. Didn't get that. Relied on Jalen Washington. He has not been able to get it done. But speaking on Alabama, I feel like Alabama still has some untapped potential here, because Phylon is one of your best players. He's in game 8. Cliff, I feel like Cliff has not been as good as he should be. Whether it's just adjustment or whatever, I feel like probably going to get better, but I feel like they still have room to tap into. Grant Nelson has gotten better. He's a better passer this year. Mark Sears has not even been that good. He has not been the National Player of the Year candidate that they've hoped for. I mean, that's not a knock. It's just he hasn't been as good as he was last year so far. Darian Reed has been a good shooter off the bench. Aiden Holloway doing his thing. And they burned Houston Millet's red shirt as well, so due to the right cell injury. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't know.
And another thing about Alabama, too, they haven't even gotten Chris Youngblood any game action yet, because he's still coming back from the injury, and he's about to get rolled out there soon based off what I'm seeing.
That's a big one,
Yeah,
but I feel like this is just this is just a punch in the face to North Carolina, because if you look at Alabama's roster, Jaron Stevenson, he's a Chapel Hill kid. They took him straight from their backyard. They wanted Cliff badly for their center spot. Alabama takes him. Alabama walks into Chapel Hill and just blows their roof off. I mean, it's just not going good for the North Carolina Tar Heels so far.
There's another guy in North Carolina, too, that we've talked about on this podcast a lot, not for good reasons, but Kate Tyson, another goose egg on 8 minutes.
I didn't even mention him.
Biggest scam of the portal.
They gave this dude a bag, and he is out there just running and not even getting double-digit minutes now. Like, this is pathetic.
Yeah,
I'll refrain with
Belmont.
Yeah, he came from Belmont.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I thought.
And this is just like another testament to what we've talked about prior on the pod. Like some of these dudes at the mid-major levels, like the game just doesn't translate once they get to a higher level, and it just seems like Carolina, this is a big whiff for them. And Derb, one thing that I don't really understand, I'd be interested to get your thoughts, is like you knew going in, we've hinted on this as we've talked about him so far, but you knew going into this season that Armando Bacot, he's used up his 15 years of college eligibility and he's out the door now. And like, how do you just not go out there and get a competent big man to step up and fill that gaping hole that we knew was going to be there?
Big whiffs. Big whiffs.
Big whiffs.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those things like that just can't happen. Obviously, nobody in there knows the situation better than the UNC head coaches. So obviously, they had to know that this situation was bad before the year even started. So y'all talked about him wanting Cliff. Why wouldn't you give him a blank check, or anybody really other than who you got going on right now? Because the writing's on the wall. The team is just not good. You're not 4-4 at this point in the year. That is the record, right?
Yeah, 4-4.
Yes, you can't be 4-4 at this point in the year and be good. It's just not how it is.
No, not at all.
I believe the reports that came out were that Cliff took a discount to go to Alabama compared to what he was going to get in North Carolina too. So I don't know if that's a testament to Nate Oates and staff, or if it's a bad thing for Hubert Davis. Maybe a little bit of both, but
I think it's more of a knock to Hubert Davis than anything. Yeah. I mean, he's not been that good in North Carolina. No. His best performance
outside the Final Four, yeah.
I would say his best thing was a fluke run. Well, I'm not going to say a fluke run because that team was good, but throughout the year, weren't they like a 9 seed, something like that?
Yeah, it was a good run, big hot run. They were like a 8 seed, 9 seed, yeah.
I would say that team was not that good. They just had a great run, and that is everything the Hubert Davis era has been.
Yeah, and then he missed the tournament with the #1 preseason ranked team.
Yeah, and I mean, I just don't understand how if you're Hubert, you went into the offseason like we're talking about, knowing that Mondo was out of there, and you thought your answer was going to be Jalen Washington, who is just now this season seeing like double-digit minutes, and then you're relying on Jalen Withers, who only averaged about 12 minutes of game time last year and came from some of the worst Louisville basketball we've seen in years. Like, did you really think that those guys were going to come out there and cook for you? Like, I don't understand. And another thing that makes me so mad about this North Carolina team, Blake, I'll let you elaborate on this a little bit. Their guards, like the talent is there. Like there's no denying who RJ Davis is. Like when he's on, he's National Player of the Year material. But he shot chucks so much, and when he gets in those modes, it just makes it impossible for them to win. And I mean, Seth Trimble is a guy that I've been big on so far. He looked poor in this game, 4 for 13. And Cadeau, I think me and Blake were hoping for a big year from him, and he's just not shown any of it so far. So, I mean, what do you think here, Blake? You think these guards are going to have to wake up and carry them to salvage this season, or is there just no salvaging this at this point?
Yeah, I definitely think, without a doubt, the guards got to pick up their production. RJ Davis, I mean, you can't keep chucking up shots and clanking 50% of them. Elliot Cadeau, I mean, if you're going to give 0 points and hardly any assists for your team, you might as well just check out and enter the portal. Like, that team doesn't need another guard that doesn't move the needle at all. And then Seth Trimble, I just feel like he's got to keep giving production on that team because, I mean, we've hit on it plenty of times already. That the big man, like, they're not going to do anything. Jalen Washington's been the same player since, like, his junior year of high school, sophomore year of high school. He's injury prone, was supposed to be a quality three-point shooter, but, I mean, he's dealt with knee injuries, like, for God knows how long. And then Van Allen Lubin, that guy, he ain't doing anything. Cade Tyson, I'll refrain from what I want to say. He's a wooden award type of guy for the power forward, position, hasn't done jack crap for them. And then, I definitely think the guards got to pick up the play because those bigs ain't saving them at all either.
Yeah, this team just feels like a mix of inconsistency at the guard spot, like you never know which RJ Davis is going to show up, and then a portal disaster class by North Carolina. But well, go ahead, Blake.
It's like bad scouting almost from Hubert. Like, you obviously want to get guys that are quality and like mesh well with your offensive scheme, defensive scheme, all those things. But if you're going to have guys who are inconsistent, awful bigs, then that's just not going to work out well. They whiffed on Adu Thiero. They whiffed on Cliff Omarui. They had some. I think they're interested in Aiden Sherrill also from Alabama. Like, just the list keeps going and going and going. I think Hubert is almost. I'm not saying they're becoming Villanova in any way. Villanova's been a disaster class besides that Cincy win. But I mean, I think we got to start having discussions about Hubert as like the heir of the throne. Like, I'm really not impressed by what he's done so far besides that Final Four.
Yeah, no, not at all, really. He inherited a good situation from Willard Williams. Like, I mean, he couldn't have been given a better group of guys to go and try and make a run with. But I picked them as my regular season ACC conference winner. I mean, that's gone. Throw it out the window. Like, that's not happening. Even if Duke has their struggles with, like, trying to get the young talent fitting in conference play, like, I just think this UNC team is not a good basketball team, and I think that's probably what we can all come to an agreement on.
It feels like they just tried to put a team together.
It's
horribly constructed. We were talking about Mark Sears being kind of underwhelming. I mean, RJ Davis is shooting 35% from the field. He has to be like top tier. He has to be like the National Player of the Year if UNC is gonna do like anything.
No,
and he has not been close. Horribly inefficient.
You know what was hilarious to me when you started talking about RJ Davis? The idea that him and Caleb Love were in the backcourt together at one point is hilarious.
Shot chuckers galore.
Yeah, RJ Davis used to be considered efficient too when Caleb Love was next to him.
Yeah, no, this is inefficient guard you over at Carolina. But while Blake mentioned Villanova, I mean, I guess that's a perfect transition into what Derb said would be a game that he'd be willing to put his house on with Cincinnati beating Villanova. That did not happen. Kyle Neptune makes a statement to give himself a little bit more time off the hot seat and beat Cincinnati.
As you can tell, I'm homeless now.
Yeah, he's actually recording this from an alleyway in a nearby suburb. But none of us saw this coming. We completely blew this game off. I mean, and rightfully so. Villanova post Jay Wright's been a disaster. Kyle Neptune's a disaster. But you got to give them credit where credit's due. They got the win here. Eric Dixon put on a show with 31. Wooga Poplar with a double-double, 12 and 10, the Miami transfer. And that was Cincinnati's first loss of the season. This was a game that Villanova, if you want to revive your season in any sort of way and get some hope, you had to start here by getting this win. And I mean, on the whole, I'm not super high on this Villanova team still. Jake, I don't know what you think about this, but are we high on Villanova after this? Like, will this be a turnaround point for them, or is it just one of those strange nights where Cincinnati just didn't have it?
No, Villanova should have fired Neptune a while ago. Man, I don't know. It feels like they're just continuing to search for something that isn't there with him. He wasn't the correct hire post Jay Wright, but they're still trying to go with him. I mean, Eric Dixon has been keeping them afloat, if that's what we're gonna call it, for the past 2-3 years now. Yeah, not sure what went wrong here with Cincinnati. I mean, losing to Villanova at this point is like losing to DePaul. It's kind of like really bad.
Well, I mean,
that's a very dark outlook for the Villanova program.
Yeah, I mean, they have better talent than DePaul, but like, it's a bad operation. It's poorly coached.
I mean, you're talking about a Villanova team that lost to Drexel last year. I mean,
shout out to Amari Williams.
Thanks.
And Columbia this year, and St. Joseph's this year.
Yeah. I mean, Blake, I guess you probably agree that this isn't really much of a Villanova statement. More so, it is a Cincinnati stinker because they
Yeah.
did shoot 38% on the game, while Villanova shot damn near 50.
Yeah, I definitely think it's just one of those, I would say, fluke type of games in the middle of the year. Eric Dixon, shout out to him. He's been balling out this year. He's like top 5 in points per game. I think it's like 25 a game right now. And he's having an unreal revival of sorts. I mean, he averaged like nearly 16 last year, but to be averaging like 25 while shooting 52% from 3, it's pretty surreal on a team that's like stinky, like awful this year. And also that Villanova, like his supporting cast, they finally decided to show up. Wooga Poplar, I've been really unintrigued by him so far this year, but he had a really good performance, had 12 points on 3 or 4 from the field, and also 6 of 6 from the free throw line. And then Jameer Brickus also had 13 points on 50% from the field. So, I mean, shout out to that team. Cincinnati, I'm not high on them whatsoever. I mean, they got a kid from like Lithuania that's like a senior. He's had a really good year. Sucked the other night against Villanova. And then Jizzle James, he's having a really good year. Had 19 against Nova. So, I mean, I'm still not high on Cincinnati. I think it's just one of those bumps in the road, though, for them.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to linger on this game too long because it wasn't a good basketball game. Let's just be honest. But if Eric Dixon keeps playing at this kind of like pace, do we think that's enough to make Villanova at least a tournament team? I want to get everybody's thoughts on that before we move on.
No, not tournament team for me, but
First,
you can stat his stats.
They could probably touch that last or first 4 in, whatever it is, but that's probably their ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a strange place to be seeing Villanova, who for a while, they were on top of the world with Jay Wright.
I mean, really the last thing I have to say about this, I didn't even watch this game, man. I just got on the ESPN app, I went to check it, and I seen Cincinnati getting their teeth kicked in, and I was like, well, here comes freezing cold takes. Just for me.
Yeah. It's going to be freezing cold weather when you lose that house, too, man. You bet the house on this one.
Bundle up, Derb.
Get ready to bundle up.
2 weeks.
But, yeah, I mean, prayers out to Cincinnati. This is going to be one of those losses in March that it may take a hit on your seeding. But we're not going to linger too much on that. Not a really intriguing basketball game whatsoever. What was an intriguing basketball game, though, Wednesday night, we had UConn. They finally got a win against a marquee opponent, taking down Baylor by 4 at home, 76-72. Aiden Mahaney, we've been slandering him to no end on this podcast. He finally decided to show up and provide somewhat of a spark. I mean, only 9 points, but he shot 3 for 4, which is better than you can say he has so far this season. Dan Hurley, he had a bit of a moment there with him on the court and one of the timeouts, pumped up, shaking him and all that. You saw that intensity. But UConn, I mean, a very solid performance here from Liam McNeely. I want to see him shoot the ball a little bit better, but he had 17. And solo ball, Blake, your man, he's been looking good again. So he had 11 points. And Samson Johnson, he finally gave you a little bit of life there with 13 points. So, I mean, for UConn, and I will be noted that they did get this win without Alex Caravan, which is a pretty impressive feat. But with UConn, I mean, I still think that our takes on what did you say, Derb?
I said it was also a VJ Edgecombe with Baylor too, though. So
yeah, VJ Edgecombe.
Which I will say those 2 players aren't comparable at all to VJ's.
No,
unbelievably underwhelming, but still.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as UConn goes as a team, this doesn't really change much for me, I would say. I mean, Baylor's a solid team, but they have some pretty obvious flaws, and we've been talking about what seems like a ton of star freshmen that are playing off the bench and flourishing. Robert Wright, he had himself a night with 22. He was the leading scorer for Baylor off the bench. He played the second most minutes out of any of their guys, and he didn't even start in this game. The only guy that had a higher amount of minutes for the Bears was Langston Love with 36. But Blake, I'll go to you first on this one. What do we think about UConn's win here? Does this kind of get things going for them? And are we concerned about Baylor because they're sitting at 5-3 right now? And we've had our discussions about what we think about Scott Drew and how things may not be looking so bright there after they got routed by Tennessee and routed by Gonzaga. So I'm curious as to what you think on this.
On the Baylor side, I mean, I would be a tad bit concerned. I mean, VJ Edgecombe, he's still probably going to be a lottery pick. He's averaging, I think, a little over a steal a game, 10 points a game. He was out for this game. Jeremy Roach ended up going into concussion protocol, like in the second half. That was a huge loss. Honestly, I don't think it completely lost them the game, but I mean, it definitely attributed some sorts to it. And then them being in the Big 12 this year, I don't think that helps them out at all in a really stacked conference. And then on the UConn side, I mean, I thought Liam McNeely had a really great game, 17 points. Well, I say great. He shot 5 of 13 from the field, 2 of 7 from 3. But, I mean, he was doing a little more than just chucking up threes. He was actually, like, attacking the rim, looked a little more comfortable on the floor tonight, like, overall on the defensive side as well. And then I remember, like, one moment, like, in the second half, him and his high school buddy, Robert Wright, for Baylor, who had a heck of a night, 20-some points. I remember they both dived, like, near the scorer's table out for a ball that was going out of bounds. And I just thought that was pretty neat to see two Montverde boys hustling, playing hard.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Robert Wright, I feel like this has been a theme, Derb. We talked about how these coaches are leaning on their experience, but Robert Wright, I mean, he gave you more off the bench than arguably anybody in Baylor's starting lineup did. Do we think that he should maybe be starting back there with Jeremy Roach? And what do you think about that, Derb?
Baylor's got to do something for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like they've not been, for somebody of Scott Drew's pedigree especially, I don't think Baylor's been what you'd expect them to be. I think their only notable win is versus a not good Arkansas team.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a Kentucky fan, whenever, the whole Kentucky hiring process was going, I was super high on Scott Drew. But now, seeing this team and seeing the blunders they've had, and, historically, they've not been that good either. They had the COVID title. And I'm unmoved at this point by Baylor. And I don't know if Scott can fix it either, per se. Because I don't know if I can tell you a single person on the Baylor team. I said Jeremy Roach, VJ Edgecombe, and I totally just forgot his name. But what was talking about he should start?
Robert Wright.
Yeah, Robert Wright. Those three are the only three notable guys I know of on Baylor. Oh wait, no, I lied. They got Norchad Amir from Miami.
Yeah, he had a pretty good game. He had 14 and 7 on 50% shooting split. But yeah, we're talking about Scott Drew here, and I mean, this has been a rough start so far for him. Jake, that was a guy that Kentucky might have thought was going to be the next coach for a little while.
Thank God.
What do we think about it? Yeah, what do we think about the underwhelming year so far for Baylor? And you think Scott Drew's going to get this thing going, or is it going to be time to have some conversations? I know you're new around here. We have our own thoughts about Scott Drew, so I'd like to get yours.
Yeah, what a disaster that would have been if Kentucky hired him and he brought this type of team with him. It would have been like the same exact problem. They can score, but they can't defend. I'm pretty sure Baylor is barely top 100 in adjusted defensive efficiency per KenPom. It's been like this for years now. They don't have a good front court. I mean, Amir's good, but they don't have like the size. Like Amir's obviously way undersized to be playing where he is. Josh Ojianwuna, I'm not even sure how I'm saying that. I don't remember the name being said, so I don't know how to say it, but he's not giving you much. He played 30 minutes. He had 14 rebounds, but I don't know, man. I don't like him at that spot, but It just feels like their defense is too bad. It's like so reminiscent of last year's Kentucky team, but I don't know. I'm not moved by UConn either. If this game was at Baylor, Baylor would have won. I feel like this is the battle of like underwhelming, and it's kind of funny because it felt like this is who Kentucky wanted, these two coaches, and then they ended with Mark Pope, and everyone was so disappointed. But man, I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like the battle of two kind of underwhelming powers so far. Because I mean, Baylor, they've
Yeah,
got that 2021 Natty, and then UConn, obviously, back to
yeah,
back. But I mean, I don't know if you all see the vision on this like I do, but in ways, this Baylor team, it almost kind of strikes me as a team that's constructed almost like a Cal team at UK the last couple of years. Since we're
That's
talking
exactly what
about
I was thinking.
yeah, since we're talking about like the difference between Scott Drew and Mark Pope, and it really this team does kind of seem almost like that Cal mold of the last couple of years. Like you got the freshman talents with Robert Wright and VJ Edgecombe, if you even want to call him a talent right now. I mean, I know he's sat, but he's been underwhelming so far. And then you sprinkle in a couple of glue guys and just go from there. But I mean, it just seems like Baylor's kind of missing an identity to this team so far to start the year, and they're going to have to develop that quick because the Big 12 is going to be a war this year. I think we can all agree on that.
It's hard to just put a completely brand new team out there and expect it to work. And that you talk about being similar to Kentucky's teams in the past. That's exactly how I felt. You got your star-studded freshmen or whatever, and then you go get you a couple big-name guys like North Tattlemere and Jeremy Roach from the portal, and everything seems fine and dandy until you got everybody out there and they don't know jack shit about each other, how to play a basketball game together. And
Yeah.
it's just not a winning recipe.
No, yeah. And I mean, since we talked about these guys being kind of the underwhelming powers, I want to go around real quick before we move on from this. If you got to put your faith in one team to make a deeper tournament run this year, are you giving it to Baylor or are you giving it to UConn? Blake, I'll start with you. Well, Dirk jumped the gun there, but Blake, what do you think?
Sorry, Blake.
You're good. I mean, this is kind of a toss-up in my head right now. I can't really pick one right now. Actually, you know what? I'm going to roll with UConn. I mean, you can't ever count out Dan Hurley. I mean, he might be a psychopath mastermind, but I mean, I seriously think if anybody can flip a team that, like, doesn't look on paper as good as, like, some of the past teams he's had that have won the Natties, I mean, he's the guy that can definitely take a team like that into like a deeper run in March.
Yeah, no, I mean, we heard Derb's opinion there, but I think that these teams are both kind of underwhelming in terms of roster construction and what their identity is. But if I've got to pick one to kind of bank on long-term success with, I mean, I think you're just being negligent if you don't ride with UConn here based off what Dan Hurley's done the last couple of years. Jake, I don't know if you agree with that or not. Or are you kind of on board with that sentiment that you got to ride with the hot hand coaching-wise with Dan Hurley, whereas Scott Drew looks like he may have lost his fastball a little bit?
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with riding with Dan Hurley after the past 2 years, but I just like Baylor's backcourt so much more than I do UConn's. And I feel like in any given game, Baylor, especially with improvement, I feel like Baylor could, with the backcourt, I just feel like they could beat anyone. They have a good game. It's like, I don't know, but I don't know. I might do the unpopular pick here and just go with Baylor. Ignoring that Dan Hurley has won the past 2 national titles and just give it to the backcourt here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, these two teams are going to be interesting to follow. Derb, you got anything to contribute before we move on here?
I know I jumped the gun when I said UConn at first. But my thing is, like, obviously UConn did bring some guys back from, the past couple of years. You got Alex Caravan and Hassan Dari, is that how you pronounce it?
Hassan Diarra, Samson Johnson, yeah.
Yes. You have guys that have been there and done that, and you have a coach who's been there and done that. Now, albeit, I don't think this team is near as good as those teams in the past. But I think when you have that experience and guys who've been there, done it, been in the war zone, I think if they get it clicking at the right time, it could fare very well.
Yeah, no, for sure. But moving on from that, we got one more marquee matchup from the Tuesday, Wednesday to kind of wrap a bow on here. And then we're going to get into our weekend preview. Number 5 Marquette goes into Ames, Iowa, takes on the Cyclones, number 6 team in the country, and they fall 81-70. In our predictions, I think we all had the Cyclones here, just clean slate across the board. And Keshawn Gilbert, he's continuing the excellent season he's had so far, giving him 24. He actually had a nose injury in that game as well, but he came back and he helped them get that game done. And Joshua Jefferson with a double-double, 15 and 12. He looked pretty good. Curtis Jones, Deshaun Jackson, they were doing their thing. And then on the other hand, Cam Jones, we had talked about him on the last pod as maybe throwing him into the mix for a National Player of the Year type of guy. He kind of put up a stinker, 6 for 21, only 14 from the not the field, but 14 points in general and 6 for 21 from the field. But Sully, we know that he hasn't been super high on this Marquette squad. They get kind of battle tested here and lose by double digits. And I mean, they got that win against Purdue earlier a couple weeks back. And I don't know how to feel about this team yet. I really don't have a good read on them. Blake, what are you thinking about Marquette? I mean, do we think that this is a team that's going to improve and going to get better, or is maybe what Sully has been hinting at so far, the loss of Kolek and all that, it may just be too much for him?
I do have to agree with Sully here, even though he's absent today from the show. But I mean, I really just don't think they have enough guys that bring them to the top per se. I get their top 10 right now, but I mean, Cam Jones, he's having a really good year. But I mean, going into Iowa State, shooting 6 of 21 from the field, like that's just a big no-no. Like when you're like the guy of that team, Stevie Mitchell, he had a good game, and then the rest of that like starting lineup put on a stinker practically. Like Chase Ross, only 10 minutes of game time, had 2 points. David Joplin, who's considered one of their top players, he only had 8 points while shooting 3 of 13 from the field. Ben Gold, 5 points. I mean, he shot efficiently, but I mean, they practically didn't contribute anything. They were relying on a freshman, Royce Parham, coming off the bench and practically keeping them in the game. He had 17 while shooting 7 of 12 from the field, had 3 threes as well. So, I mean, I'm really not high on that Marquette team. And then a couple things, like it's not necessarily about the game. Well, one thing is, or they both are, I lied. One, why is the game on ESPN Plus? It's a top 10 matchup. Number 2, was Bill Belichick and Tom Brady in that arena? Like that ball ended up getting
deflated ball.
Yeah, Deflategate Part 2. Like that, I've never seen that honestly in a college game or even a professional game like that I've seen during my lifetime. I mean, I've seen it happen at the high school level around my area, but I mean, I haven't seen anything like that in a sport where like it's pretty wealthy in the NCAA, NBA, places like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think an eye-opening thing here as well, if you're a Cyclone fan, is you didn't really get anything out of guys like Taman Lipsy and Milan Mocilovic. I hope I said that right. I might have butchered it. Milan, he only had 5 points, and then Taman Lipsy, he's a guy I've been pretty high on. He only had 1 point the whole game. And they still managed to beat a Marquette team that, as of now, is top 5. Whether they continue to be top 5 is another thing. But that's an impressive win. And I think that, this Iowa State team, they've got the pieces there to put together a deep run when it comes to March success. And, Jake, I don't know what you think about them. We didn't get a chance to get your preseason predictions on, like, Final Four caliber teams, and I picked Iowa State as one of mine that I thought we could see there. What do you think overall about the mold of this Iowa State team and what we could see from them moving forward?
Yeah, I definitely think Iowa State is Final Four caliber. They they had Auburn on the ropes, and I think Auburn is unanimously the best team in the country, at least for right now. But man, they were at home. I think I feel like Iowa State was supposed to win this game, and they did it. They took care of home court. They did their thing, but for Marquette, and they're just gonna go as far as Cam Jones takes them. He had a bad game. They didn't stand a chance. So David Joplin, he's their second. He didn't do anything either. It was pretty much a disaster for them, since they were trying to go on the road and beat Iowa State. But man, I think I don't know. I don't know what to think of Marquette. I feel like they're too based around Cam Jones, and they have some good pieces around him, but I feel like it could get a lot better. But Iowa State is definitely a lot more balanced, and their defense is just so suffocating. So I like them a lot more than I like Marquette. But yeah, I mean, I feel like this game went exactly as it should have went. So
Yeah, shout out to Curtis Jones on Iowa State as well, chipping in 14 off the bench. He kind of subbed in for Taman Lipsey, who was kind of struggling. And Derb, I don't know what you think about Marquette before we move off of this. Do we think that things are just going to keep getting worse for them, and we may see them string together, more like tough losses and all that kind of stuff? Or do you think that they have the potential to ride the Cam Jones train and see where it takes them?
I knocked my computer again. My bad. No, I mean, I don't think Marquette will be bad per se. They're not in the toughest conference by any means. And, they do have a pretty good pedigree going on. So I would imagine that overall they'll end up being an okay team. But also, I don't think Shaka Smart is that guy either. There's a reason he got ran out of Texas. So I don't think the ceiling will ever be that high, Marquette.
No, not at all. And I think that kind of puts a good end to the Tuesday to Wednesday slate. I mean, a few quick hitters before we move on to getting into some of the preview aspect of the upcoming weekend. Tennessee, who very well could be the number one team in the country come to AP poll after the Kansas and Auburn losses. They rolled against Syracuse 96-70. Dusty May, he gets a signature win against Wisconsin on the road, winning by 3. Georgia Tech, they got rolled by Oklahoma. Wake Forest and Texas A&M, what a final scoreline we had there, 44-57. Battle of the shot chuckers there with Wade Taylor, 4 for 11. Who would have thought? Hunter Salas, 7 for 22. Not the greatest. I mean, terrible basketball game, truth be told. And then Louisville, they get steamrolled at the Yum Center by Ole Miss, and they took quite the blow losing Kayshawn Pryor for the year, and I think that could really hurt their season moving forward. I'm a little bit concerned about my underrated team of the year pick so far with Pat Kelsey and those boys, but Virginia, they got routed by Florida 69-87. Florida, they keep producing and they keep putting together performances that make you think they could be at the top of the SEC. Very impressed with them. Blake, we got to address a hot take that you had that did not work out well at all. You took Pitt against our boy Josh Hubbard and the Mississippi State Bulldogs, and 57-90 was the final there. Mississippi State wins. That was a tough break for you.
Yeah, I was just going with the hot hand. Pittsburgh was 18 coming into the game. I mean, all love to Josh, but I mean, I didn't think this game was going to turn out like this. I mean, Jalen Lowe put on a good show. He's been a quality player for them. But, I mean, besides that, Jalen Lowe also went 7 of 21. Points-wise, he did well. But, I mean, the rest of that team kind of stunk it up. Braden Cummins had a good game. But, I mean, Mississippi State just steamrolled them. Like, it was never really close.
And I thought it would be a close game that Mississippi State would come out with the win on. But, I mean, after that kind of performance, I think it's time to rank Mississippi State. I don't know if you all agree with that, but I think they're definitely top 25 caliber.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they were top 25, I think, a week and a half ago, a little before Thanksgiving. And then they had a couple bad games. Yeah. But, I mean, they're definitely still a top 25 team. I mean, they're going to play some really, really tough comp come January in the SEC. So, I mean, they definitely could steal a couple games against some top teams in that conference.
Yeah, the SEC is going to be a war for sure. And the big upset of the night yesterday was Purdue. They lost to Penn State 81-70. The Zach Edey-less Purdue Boilermakers, they continue to struggle. And, I mean, well, not continue to struggle, I should say, but I guess they're trying to find their identity in this post-Zach Edey era. They've picked up quality wins. So they got that win against Bama, but they did get steamrolled against Marquette. And overall, they don't really, I mean, I don't know what you all think, but this team on paper, it doesn't really move me one way or the other. I mean, I don't know what you all think about that, but
I mean, Trey Kaufman-Renn, he's like I'd say he's probably their best player right now. He's been consistent, putting up like 15 plus in their past, I think, 5 games or so. It might even be more. Every time I put on their game or box score watch, he's going off. And then I kind of jinxed Braden Smith on our last episode. I said something about him, like literally never having a bad game. Well, I mean, last night he had a pretty awful showing. I think he had, it might have been 6 points. Yeah, 6 points. I mean, he shot efficient, only 5 shots, but then he had, 5 assists, 1 steal. He had 3 turnovers. I mean, turnovers were kind of the telling story of that game for Purdue. I mean, Kaufman-Renn had 7, Braden Smith 3, Fletcher Lawyer 5, while shot chucking 3 of 10 from the field. Got a majority of his points from the free throw line, went 8 of 8 there. But I mean, you just can't have that for Purdue, and that kind of just goes to show how hard it is to win on the road. Not just this year, but like in college basketball as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, Purdue, I think they're going to be a decent team throughout the regular season. I mean, they showed that they've got the ability to knock off teams like Marquette and Alabama, but they also showed last night that they have the potential to drop games at random like this.
Yeah.
And Derb, how are you feeling about the Zach Edey post-era Purdue Boilermakers?
They're not a bad team by any means, but without somebody like Zach Edey, without having that guy, you can go to night in, night out, 7 days a week. People like Braden Smith need to be better. He can't afford to have bad nights, because the moment somebody like him has a bad night,
An entire team, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he is like, outside of Kaufman-Renn, he is, the heart and soul of that team. He is their best player outside of Renn there. And he's essentially dead weight. And, obviously, you have somebody like Zach Edey, like they did last year, who can put up 40 and 20. Well, he has some insane stat lines last year, on an any given night basis. Or, 25 and 10, like he's doing it in his sleep. They don't have anybody like that this year. And so I would say they have a decent floor, but their ceiling is like just right above it.
Yeah, you mentioned their ceiling. I want to hear everybody's opinion on this. We'll start with Jake. What do we think the ceiling is for this Purdue team? Do we think they're a second weekend team, or do they stall out at like the Sweet 16, or maybe not even make the second weekend? What do we feel about these guys?
Yeah, I can see it making the second weekend, but I don't know if it'll go much farther than that, Sweet 16. But Braden Smith has not been aggressive. Only took 5 shots. He's probably your best player. I mean, losing Zach Edey is obviously, that might be the biggest loss out of any team, considering the focal point he's been for them past 2 to 3 years. But, Braden Smith, you're next up. You can't just take 5 shots on the road. They got to find something. Fletcher Lawyer was chucking. They had a big time, or they were really struggling to stop Penn State from scoring. So, yeah, I don't know. But they're going to have to figure something out. Braden Smith is going to have to start taking a lot more shots or something. Yeah. CJ Cox can get you some buckets off the bench, but it's more of like a group effort this year. They don't have Zach Edey, obviously, so it has to be a collective effort. Yeah.
Yeah, Blake, what are you feeling about Purdue? What's the ceiling for this group?
I'd say the ceiling right now is like a Sweet 16. I mean, Coach Painter, I mean, he's one of the best in all of college basketball, personally, I think. But that team, like on paper and even just like watching their games, it just doesn't impress me a whole lot. But I mean, they do have the pieces like Braden Smith, as we said, Trey Kaufman-Wren. If those two play up to their standards, they're without a doubt a Sweet 16 type of team. But I mean, on the flip side of that, I do see them potentially being a second weekend type or second weekend type of team, like exiting there because I mean, as we've seen, Fletcher Lawyer really inconsistent. I mean, if you're relying on CJ Cox coming off the bench to give you decent minutes and nobody else off that bench, then you're hurting. And then Camden Heide, I mean, he's kind of like Casper out there, not really doing anything. Miles Colvin's been uh, efficient this year, but I mean, he's not giving a whole lot to that team.
Yeah, no, I'm sticking on board with the Sweet 16 ceiling for them. Derb, you think they've got the potential to be anything more than that, or is that kind of where we see them
No, I
stall
think that's
out?
exactly where their ceiling is.
Yeah.
I think their floor is like around the 32. So, I mean,
Mhm.
always make it to the second round of the tournament is at least something. But I think
Yeah.
that's their floor. But their ceiling, like I said.
Also,
Right here,
shout out
ceiling
Puff
right there.
Johnson. Shout out Puff Johnson, still playing college ball.
All these years later. Yeah, I mean, when we talk about these teams and their ceiling right now, obviously it's early in the year, so we're just kind of guessing at this point and going off results. But another thing about, we know how random March is. It's really going to be matchup dependent for a lot of these teams where we're not so sure what they are yet. And who they get matched up against in March could be the deciding factor of how far they make it. But that kind of puts an end to the recap portion of the pod. We're going to move on to the weekend preview. We got decent amount of games on tap here, not as many as Feast Week provided us with all those different festivals and MTEs going on. But we'll start here on Saturday. Wisconsin, they're going and taking on Marquette. A little bit of a Wisconsin State battle there. I'm trying to find the spread and see what exactly Vegas is thinking about this game. I don't see it. So we're going to look at the. What'd you say?
I said Marquette is in Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's in Wisconsin.
I never knew that. I knew Creighton was in Nebraska. But
No, it's in Wisconsin. But yeah, I mean, this kind of feels like a get right game for Marquette. I mean, you're getting a team in Wisconsin that's coming off of a unexpected loss to Michigan, and I mean, this could be a spot where you catch them. But John Tonji for Wisconsin, he's been a stud so far this year, and Cam Jones obviously has been hooping as well. That's going to be an interesting matchup to look into there at the guard spot, see how that goes. But I guess we'll do a little quick fire prediction here, go around the table and see what we're feeling. Blake, who comes out on top in this game and why? What is the ultimate reason that they're going to come out on top in this one?
I think in this one I'm gonna have to go with Wisconsin. I think John Tonji. I get it's a team sport, but I mean just that guy himself this season. It's hard to beat him. I mean they whooped on Arizona, who we've talked about. Blackwell, he's been having a really good season, averaging 15 a game, nearly 5 boards a game as a guard. And then Max Klessman has been having a really good year on both sides of the floor, averaging almost 2 steals a game, almost 3 assists, almost 2 boards, and 11 points. So, I mean, that trio right there, I think, is just hard to beat. And, I mean, also, Cam Jones, if he ends up coming out for Marquette, like how he did against Iowa State, I mean, I just don't see a world where Wisconsin doesn't win that game.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that you could say, I'm kind of like you, Blake. I think I'm going to go with Wisconsin here, but they do have to factor in that they are going on the road to Marquette, so it's going to be played. It's going to be played in a tough environment, obviously, which can always be a factor. But I think that we're going to see another big game out of John Tonji, and I think this Marquette team, as we've alluded to, they may not be at quite the level they were with Tyler Kolek last year, and I'm not too sure what to think about this group as a whole yet. And I mean, I know Wisconsin, they're coming off the loss, and you may catch them in a letdown spot here, like beating up on a team that's already down. But I think they're going to come out and they're going to get a statement win, improve on that conference record of theirs that sits in 0-1 right now after that Michigan game. Derb, what do you think?
Give me Marquette.
Marquette?
Yep.
Yes,
Marquette,
sir.
Marquette by 5.
Marquette by 5. All right. Book it with Derb.
Give me 77-72.
Gotcha. Jake, what do you think?
I'll go with Derb here. I'm going Marquette. Wisconsin, for Torvik, they have the 80th ranked adjusted defensive efficiency in the country. They're going on the road for the first time. Give me Cam Jones in a big game. Marquette wins.
Cam Jones in a big one. Yeah, I could see that happening. We got a split panel here. Me and Blake, I guess, are going to be the lone riders for Wisconsin, but it's going to be a good game, I think. A very good matchup, and that one's on at 1:30 on Saturday on Fox. We'll keep an eye on that one. Another intriguing matchup here. We've got the, well, if you want to call it intriguing, this might just be a battle of mid. It's just weird to see North Carolina sitting here at 4-4. They're taking on a Georgia Tech team that is also 4-4. I mean, that for Carolina, I think they're going to win with ease here, and I think you have to win with ease here if you want to get this train back on the tracks. Derb, what do you think? You think this is kind of it's a get-right spot, but it's also one of those get-right spots where you're not really going to think that you succeeded at getting right unless you put on a big performance and just go off and beat the brakes off of Georgia Tech.
I'm gonna hit you with a hot take.
Uh-oh.
Wait, hold on. Let me dial it back a little bit. Is it a home game for UNC?
Yeah.
It is. Yes, it is at UNC.
And you know what? Who gives a damn? Give me Georgia Tech.
Man, Derb just wants to see this North Carolina season burn.
I want to watch it go down in flames.
Yeah,
Listen,
I mean,
both of them can suck, but until North Carolina gives me a reason as to why they don't suck, I'm just going to be praying on their downfall.
that's valid. I mean, I don't know. I just think that Georgia Tech is just too bad of a basketball team to give Carolina a game. But, I mean, Carolina's not looking too hot. Blake, what do you think?
I won't take up a lot of time on this one. Easy is UNC by 10+. I mean, Georgia Tech's been awful against good teams this season. Lost by 15 to Oklahoma. Lost by, I think, 23 to Cincinnati, who, I mean, I talked about. I don't think they're very good. And then they lost by 8 to a Georgia team who, coming into the season, wasn't touted very highly. But, I mean, they're still a quality team in the SEC. So, give me UNC by 10.
Yeah, for sure. Jake, what do you think to round this one out?
Yeah, I'm not going to overthink it. I'll go UNC. I think Georgia Tech is still a year or two away from competing at a higher level. They got blown out by Cincy, blown out by Oklahoma. Lost to Georgia, not that bad though. At home though, North Carolina. Yeah, I don't think it'll be close.
Derb's gonna look like a mastermind if Georgia Tech wins this one.
Y'all start seeing the vision. Jose Alvarado can come out of the stands.
From the stands, that's crazy. Yep. All right, and then we got another one that's a continuation of the Big 12 Big East battle. I think it might be the last one of that, actually. We got Butler, who's sitting at 7-1, taking on a Houston team that, kind of like Carolina, they've underwhelmed to start the season. They're sitting at 4-3, and we've discussed Houston. I said that they were one of the losers of Feast Week, and I mean, overall, I'm not super high on this team long term. I do think that they're going to beat Butler just because of the fact that they have more talent. But when one of your main talents on this team and bucket getters is LJ Cryer, who's shooting like 36% on the season so far. That's not a recipe for success. And we've talked at length about the value of Jamal Shed when it comes to this team. And I think that as time goes on, we're going to see just how bad they missed him, and we've already seen it. But I'm not overthinking this one. I'm going Houston. I think they win easily. Derb, how about you?
Yeah, give me Houston. Like I said, I think at the end of the day, some basketball teams are just better than others.
Yeah.
And I think this probably is one of those cases. Because, Houston has talent. Houston's coach is a great coach. He's done wonderful things there. Well, they've been a 1 seed, like 3 out of the last 5 years?
Yeah, I think so.
So, I mean, he's a good coach. They've got a solid roster. They've been below their expectations as far as the last couple of years. But I don't think Butler will have anything for them.
Yeah, I mean, Jake, I assume you're not going to be overthinking this one much.
No, Butler will have to show me that they can play with a team like Houston and match their physicality. So Houston probably in a blowout.
Yeah. Blake, you on board with that sentiment?
Yeah, I agree. I think Houston will put on the show. But a part of me also thinks that Butler is a really underrated team this year. They beat Mississippi State by 10. They beat Northwestern, who is fairly decent this year, by 2. They beat SMU by 11. So, I mean, they're definitely not a team to laugh about this year. But, I mean, I still think Houston's got that game.
Yeah, for sure. And then we got the nightcapper for Saturday, a very late one if you're on the East Coast, 10 o'clock. Kentucky is going to Seattle and taking on Gonzaga. They are coming off that Clemson loss that we discussed at length earlier. And, I mean, for a team that's coming off their first loss of the year, what a way to be thrown back into the fire, having to go to Seattle and taking on a Gonzaga team that has looked very solid to start the year. And, I mean, Mark Few, he's built quite the program there the last couple of years. And to me, the key for this game, it's going to sound simple, but, I mean, Kentucky's got to make their shots. I mean, you can't have another Clemson-type performance here. You're just going to get boat raced by Gonzaga, especially with it being in away territory. This technically qualifies as a neutral game, but, I mean, Spokane to Seattle, that's really not too bad for Gonzaga fans. For me, I'm going to save my pick for last. Blake, you take it first. I want to think about this one for a minute.
This is another big toss-up for me. I do think Pope's Cats are going to come in after being battle-tested at a ruckus Clemson crowd. But I still think Gonzaga's a top-notch team this year. Obviously, I think Kentucky is too. But I mean, I just think Gonzaga's got too many moving pieces as a whole. I think their front court is really good, especially Ben Gregg. I feel like Graham Ike is going to be an issue for Kentucky. And then Nolan Hickman, Dusty Stromer, guys like that for Gonzaga. I just feel like they could be too much for the Cats. But, I mean, also to play the other side, if Lamont Butler plays more than 18 minutes and is actually healthy, I do see a world where Kentucky pulls this one off. I mean, if Pope can rally those guys in an extremely tough environment, even though it's a neutral site game, well, quote unquote, it's in, I think, Seattle, Washington. So, I mean, that's nothing but a short drive for people in Spokane. If he can get his team rallied and bought in to his coaching for that game, I mean, I definitely could see Kentucky winning that game. And Jackson Robinson, this is the last thing I'll say. He's sort of struggled from the field as we've seen so far. It's a small sample, but he went 5 of 13, I think, at Clemson. That was a bad shooting night for everybody on that Kentucky team, really. But, I mean, it could lead to being worried, I would say, for Kentucky fans. I mean, I still think he's a really good player. Don't get me wrong. But, I mean, and then also in the Duke game, he put up a stinker. I think it was like 1 point. So, I mean, if he ends up playing well, shoots efficiently, and is active like he was in that second half of that Duke game, I mean, I definitely could see Kentucky pulling that one off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still mulling mine over a little bit, so I'm going to hand this off to Jake. Jake, you think that our Cats are going to get it done, or is this going to be 2 straight L's for Pope?
Yeah, well, the keys for Kentucky are going to be Lamont and Andrew Carr need to stay out of foul trouble. They need to have big games. You're basically going on the road to Gonzaga. Seattle is like quite literally the farthest you can travel in the United States from Lexington, I believe. So that's going to be hard to overcome. But at the same time, Kentucky likes to use their tempo. They're one of the fastest teams in the country in terms of how they push the ball, and they like to run their opponent. We saw against Duke with Shire's refusal to use his bench, like Isaiah Evans, and his other bench players. Obviously, he didn't use them. Other players got tired. They were just running the legs out of them. But with Gonzaga, Gonzaga actually has pretty good depth. Like it's pretty comparable to Kentucky. So I'm not sure that's gonna work exactly, but we'll see. But yeah, man, I don't know. I'm gonna have to go Gonzaga just because it's in Seattle. Um, and definitely Gonzaga if Lamont doesn't even play. We don't know his status yet, but they're gonna need him, and he's gonna have to play a big game. Yeah, Otega, Jackson, Brea are gonna have to hit some shots. It's definitely gonna be their toughest game of the season thus far, even harder than Duke. So we'll see what they got, I guess.
For sure. Derb, what do you think, my man? Kentucky or the Zags going to pull it out here?
Yeah, if Lamont plays, my heart's telling me Kentucky. I don't know what it is, but I mean, that's only if Lamont plays. I'll just go ahead and say if Lamont doesn't play, give me Zaga by probably 12.
Yeah, it could get ugly.
But if he plays, one thing I do think that helps Kentucky is, they had the loss, earlier in the week. Well, we've had zero time to sulk on that. I mean, this team is surely getting baptized by fire. Going from one environment to arguably a worse one. Not really arguably a worse one. I mean, this would be the equivalent of Kentucky playing UCLA at fucking Eastern Kentucky over here. They may say it's a neutral site, but no. I think it's also bigger than Gonzaga's normal arena too, so it's going to be it's going to be packed with nothing but Gonzaga fans, and about double the size. But like I said, in a way, I think that helps Kentucky because you got to keep your head on the swivel. They've not had any time to solve, not had any time to complain. You got to put your nose in the grindstone and just go for it. So if Lamont plays, give me the Cats. If not, Gonzaga by a landslide.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about this game a lot. I mean, if Kentucky doesn't put up a stinker, like say they just play, like the expectation for them, like what we've seen so far, the offense is clicking and they like play the way they did against Duke, I think that they could very well come out on top. My only concern is that with Lamont's health in question, you kind of wonder how much he's going to be able to give you even if he does play. And I think if he's limited in any form, that definitely stunts Kentucky a lot because I'm sorry, but Kirk Creason and Travis Perry trying to run this offense, that it doesn't give me happy thoughts going into this game at all. I'm just going to be straight up. And I'm concerned about Amari Williams and Andrew Carr going up against Gonzaga's big man because I think Gonzaga has some very talented big men. They've got Graham Ike, who we saw, he came to Rupp last year and played against UK, and so did Braden Huff. I think Braden Huff actually had a really good game against UK last year, but UK's big men were like non-existent on that team. And then it's what'd you say?
Don't disrespect K-State legend Ugonna Onions.
Ugonna Onions. Oh God, I'm gonna pretend like you didn't say that. But yeah, Ben Gregg, Braden Huff, Graham Ike. I just think that they're better than Amari Williams, Andrew Carr, and Brandon Garrison. I mean, I could be wrong on this, but it's such a tough one because you know what? I'm just gonna not overthink it. I think Gonzaga, they've got the home court. Well, home court, I get neutral site, but it's close. I think that's gonna play a big factor for them. Kentucky's going into a time zone in a region they're not familiar with. They're going to be going into a hostile environment. And Gonzaga, this team is just loaded from top to bottom. And I don't know. I think this is going to be too much for UK to overcome. I could very well be wrong, and they could come out and make a statement and prove me wrong, and that's what I'm hoping for. But we'll see. It's going to be very intriguing. I guess what I would ask you all is if Kentucky's going to win, who has to have like the biggest impact on the game for them to come out on top? Blake, I'll start with you.
Of course, you pick me when I'm still mulling it over.
Hey, if you want to pass to somebody else, go ahead. I've passed it on.
No, it's all right. I'll toughen it out. I'll have to go with multiple people, actually. I mean, Kobe Brea, after just putting up like 3 or 4 shots last game, only 18 minutes. I mean, you obviously have to have that production. And then Jackson Robinson, as I've talked about, I mean, he has to perform well for Kentucky to do good. Like, I feel like that team's only as good. That team's only as good as, like, what those guards take them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the most important guard is obviously Lamont, and with his health in question, that raises some question marks. But Derb, if Kentucky's going to come out on top, who do you think's got to be the best for him?
Obviously, Lamont is the obvious answer for this. But given the fact that everybody, just purely based off his status for the game, but everybody knows that. So to give an answer outside of him, honestly, I got to go Andrew Carr. Because obviously he was huge in that Duke game. He's the main reason we won it. But he's had some really good games for us. But I think he's also went and goes 2 to 3 games. And we aren't going to go in there and win this game if he has a 5-point performance. We need probably 15 plus out of him.
Yeah, for sure. Jake, what say you? Who do you think's got to step up?
Yeah, Derb stole my answer with Andrew Carr, so I think it's Andrew Carr because he has to bounce back after last game. Gonzaga has a tough front court. Andrew Carr has to either be one of the best or, if not, the best front court player in this game if Kentucky's going to have a chance to win. And I'll give another answer since Derb already said Carr, but I'll go with Amari Williams because he's going to have to shut down Graham Ike. Braden Huff comes off the bench, another good 5-man. Both good scorers, so Amari Williams has his work cut out for him. The front court players for Kentucky are going to be the key in this game if they want to win on the road, I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking about this matchup. I really think the big men battling in the trenches is what's going to decide this. And I guess for me, the basic answer I would say is probably Jackson Robinson. Like, these are the type of games you brought him to Kentucky for. Like, you want him to shine in these big moments. And one of the big questions with this Kentucky team has been, like, who's going to be the go-getter? Who's going to go get you a bucket when you need it? And I really think that Jackson is probably the only guy on the team that might be truly capable of it. Possibly Kobe Brea, maybe, but he kind of operates more off the ball, in my opinion. But another question I'll throw out here before we kind of transition and talk a little bit more about Gonzaga and what the key for them is going to be. What percentage chance would you all give Kentucky if Lamont doesn't play? Is it a straight-up 0, or is there any slim kind of hope for him?
Yeah, I'll go like – you go ahead, Blake.
You got it, Jake. You got it. You're the new one here.
All right, I'll give him like 10%. It's going to be – you're trying to go to Seattle, play Gonzaga, top 10, top 5-ish team without your starting point guard. Yeah, good luck. 10%, man.
Yeah.
And I'll have to up the ante a little bit. I would put it at like 35%. I mean, Lamont Butler, like, if he's out, then obviously that's a huge decline in that offensive production. And if you're going to rely on Kirk Kriisa and potentially Travis Perry, that could be disaster. But, I mean, they still got really good supporting people. like Jackson Robinson, Kobe Brea, Amari Williams. I mean, they just got guys on guys. Andrew Carr. I mean, I don't think it's out of the question that they still can win that game. But I mean, I don't know.
Derb, what's your percentage chance if Lamont doesn't play for a UK win?
15. But if we win, it's because Kerr Creaser he's at least got to put up 12. I think that happened. An efficient 12, not 4 for 13 from the 3-point line. We can't have shot chuckers RS going on out there.
Shot chuckers RS. That's a
you
new
might
one.
have to trademark that, Derb.
Yeah, he may have to trademark that one. I like that. So now on the flip side of this, so if Gonzaga is going to come out on top, is the story for them going to be as simple as their bigs won the battle in the front court, or do we think that there's going to be more of a headline when it comes to the guards like Caleb Battle and Nolan Hickman, Ryan Nembhard, those dudes? Who do we think, if Gonzaga is coming away with this win, is going to be the headline for them?
I'll start. I think it's going to be Ryan Nembhard. He controls everything for them. He's the engine of the team. If Lamont can't play, or Lamont simply isn't healthy enough to stay in front of him and stop him from doing things, then it could get bad, man. He sets them up really nicely. Yeah, and if they're stopping Kentucky from hitting perimeter shots, then man, it could get bad in Seattle.
Anybody but Nolan Hickman, Snake.
Oh yeah,
the former Kentucky
here.
commit.
Again, I guess, for the third straight time.
Former Kentucky commit, Nolan Hickman. So anybody but Nolan Hickman, says Derb. What do you say, Blake?
I mean, Jake basically said it already. I think that team goes as far as Ryan Nembhard takes them. I mean, he's averaging 10 assists a game, double-digit points too. I mean, he sucks. Well, not sucks, but he's not doing so hot from the field, like 39%. So, I mean, if he's off from the field, and if he's not facilitating at a high level, then, I mean, that could spark some questions for Gonzaga.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely going to be a game that we'll all be keeping our eyes on. I think it's going to be a close, tough battle, but I'm going to roll with the Zags in this one. And I did say going into this week that I thought 1-1 was the most likely scenario for Kentucky here. I didn't think that Clemson would be the one loss. So, I mean, if you're going to try and bounce back, what better way for you to do that than go into Seattle and beat Gonzaga? Because that would essentially just completely counteract the effects of the Clemson loss, in my opinion, when you're talking resume and current ranking. But we'll see. It's definitely going to be a big-time game, and I'm excited to watch it as a Kentucky fan and just as a college basketball enthusiast. But Sunday, it's not short on games either. There's a couple ones I want to hit on here real quick before we cap off this episode. Kansas and Missouri. Kansas is going to Missouri. This is a little bit of a rival here, the border battle between Kansas and Missouri. Does anyone think Missouri has a chance in this game, or is Kansas going to roll here and get their lick back after taking a loss down in Creighton?
I think Kansas gets the win, but I think Missouri has a chance. I just don't think they have like a Kalkbrenner like Creighton did that can stop Dickinson completely. So we'll have to see how they handle that. But I think they have a chance because they're at home. Kansas didn't look too good on the road at Creighton, but we'll see.
Yeah, give me a Hunter Dickinson bounce back spot here. I think they win, maybe by about 8 or 10. I think Missouri might scrap with them for a bit, but I don't expect them to win. Derb, what do you think?
Yeah, give me Kansas in this one. I mean, Missouri won like 2 games last year. So
yeah, they were atrocious.
Obviously, they're a lot better this year than they were last year. But I think that gap is too big between them to make up within 1 year. So I got Kansas in this one. Not easily, but I don't really think it'll necessarily be a struggle either.
Blake, you agree with us on this one?
Yeah, I mean, Kansas without a doubt. Missouri struggled not struggled. They're having a good year, but I mean, all their games have practically been like neck and neck. I mean, they lost by 8 to Memphis. I mean, Memphis is a good team, but I mean, they're no Kansas, to be honest with you. And I mean, Missouri's front court, it's awful, to be honest with you. They're relying on Peyton Marshall, who I've never been high on, and Josh Gray to be their saviors in that front court. And Hunter Dickinson coming off a subpar game. I mean, he might put up like huge numbers, maybe like 25, 15. Like I could see him going off, and Kansas just never taking their foot off the pedal at that one. Even though it's a road game, I just don't see Missouri having that game close at all.
This definitely has all the makings of a get-right game for Kansas. I agree with that. Yeah. Another intriguing matchup we got here, Texas A&M's taking on Texas Tech in what is being called the USLBM Coast to Coast Challenge. I'm not sure how this is coast to coast, given that it's A&M versus Texas Tech, but whatever. Simple as this, I'm going to say Texas Tech wins. You all know what I think about A&M and Wade Taylor's shot chucking tendencies. Give me a JT Toppin big game here for Texas Tech, the New Mexico transfer, who's one of my favorite mid-majors. I've been keeping an eye on Donovan Denton, New Mexico, with Rick Pitino's son down there. They're cooking. But give me Texas Tech in this game. I'm not high on Texas A&M in the grand scheme of college basketball this year. And Derb, I think you kind of agree with me on the shot chucking nature of this Texas A&M team. So
yeah.
Who you got?
Yeah, give me Texas Tech. But hey, listen, I want to give credit to Wade Taylor for his 3 for 17 shooting performance he's going to put up.
Got to give credit where credit's due.
Yep.
Yep. Blake, what do you think? Texas A&M or Texas Tech?
I'll make this prediction a quick one. A&M by 8+. I mean, I'm not a huge believer in that Texas Tech squad. Neither am I about A&M, but I mean, I think Wade Taylor and the rest of the team will still put up good numbers that game.
Yeah, for sure. Jake, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going Tech. I think Texas A&M is just too inefficient from the field to keep up on the road in this one. Darian Williams and JT Toppin have been really good at the forward spots for Tech thus far. Give me Tech.
Yeah, agreed. So this game that we're about to talk about now, I think is actually a pretty intriguing one of the more intriguing ones of the weekend. We've got UConn playing Texas. I don't know what Caravan's status is for UConn as of now. I don't know if anybody's gotten an update on that, but I think that this is going to be a close game. I like, obviously, what we've seen out of Trey Johnson so far this year. He's one of the better college basketball freshmen we got right now. And this is going to be a test for UConn for sure. I mean, this Texas team, they don't have a number yet next to their name just yet, but sitting at 7-1 on the season, their only loss so far is to Ohio State. However, they haven't really been battle-tested yet, so this is kind of their first test.
Shout out Aaron Bradshaw.
Shout out Aaron Bradshaw. But, yeah, this is going to be kind of their first test, really, like major test, I would say. So I'm going to take, you know what, this is going to be my first major upset pick of the weekend, if you want to call it major. Give me Texas. Trey Johnson, I think he's going to go nuclear, and they're going to take down Dan Hurley, and UConn's going to fall to 6-4. Derb, what do you think? You going to rock with me here?
Yeah, give me Texas. Just given the fact of UConn, especially if Caravan's not out, they don't have a ton going for them right now, and they're getting their 5th team of the year with a pulse, or 6th, whatever it is at this point. And, you know, the other matchups haven't been too great. I don't expect this one to be any different.
Fair. What do you think, Blake?
I mean, this game being at Moody Center in front of all the Texas faithful, I mean, I think Trey Johnson's going to go nuclear. I get DR as a really good on-ball defender, but I mean, when you're fighting or you got power versus power, like power offense, power defense. I mean, I'm taking the offense in this one. Trey Johnson's been as good as you could ask for out of a freshman. And then his supporting cast like Arthur Kaluma and Caden Shedrick have been really good this year. So, I mean, I got Texas in this one.
We going with a clean sweep for Texas, or you going UConn, Jake?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the clean sweep here. UConn hasn't showed that they can win away from home yet. 0-3 in Maui. Caravan status up in the air. Moody Center is definitely a tough place to play. Signs are pointing to Texas.
Now, do we think that Dan Hurley has over or under 5.5 crash outs on a ref or the media in this game? I'm going with
I'm
the
sure
over.
it's getting nailed with the over. Probably
Yeah,
put
it
it
could
like
be
8
bad.
at least.
You
Especially
said
with the
5.5?
Moody Center.
5.5, yes.
Put the line at 8.5, and then you got the over.
Especially with the Moody Center yelling in his face, he could be getting pissed off.
Yeah, he is. The only thing I worry about with Texas is, they've got that big football game against Georgia on Saturday, SEC championship. So I don't know if their fans
Students
are
are
going
all
to be
in Atlanta.
Yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
their fans are going to be all in on this game or not. They may be down there in Atlanta cheering
That
on the
might be a
football
good
team.
point. That might be a good point.
So if you want to look at UConn, like what would be the recipe for them to win there? I guess you could say you catch Texas in a more underwhelming home environment than they're accustomed to. And then from a player aspect, I mean, obviously you want Caravan to be able to suit up. They've shown they can win without him, as shown in that Baylor game. But Baylor, we hinted on them earlier, VJ Edgecombe being out. That was obviously something working against them. But I would say, for UConn, you want to see Aiden Mahaney build on the performance that he had against Baylor. He started to find himself slightly there. I mean, nothing just like that stands out completely in the box score, just with 9 points, but that's better than what he had been doing, because he had been putting up like 1, 2, and 0 points. And I think that Liam McNeely, you want him to keep doing his thing. He's been pretty impressive to start the season, actually. I don't think anybody really expected him to be as good as he has been. Maybe they thought he'd be more of a role type of player, but I don't know. I think that Texas gets it done. I hope their fans show out for what should be a good game there in the Moody Center. And we've got Duke. They're coming off that huge win against Auburn, going to the Ville at the Yum Center to take on the Cardinals. This is the first game of ACC play for both these squads. Louisville is obviously kind of reeling with some injuries right now, taking hits on the roster, losing Kayshawn Pryor, and I believe they are also missing one other player. I'm just
Baron
forget-
Johnson. He's their backup point guard.
Yeah, they're missing him. So they obviously are dealing with the injury bug right now. Those problems aren't going to go away with Pryor being out for the year. To put it simple, I think Duke rolls here. They're the better team, even with Louisville at full strength. And without Pryor, if you have Pryor in this game and the guys that Louisville's missing, maybe you can make an argument for it being closer. But I think that Duke's going to go into Louisville and roll, to be quite frank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've gotten blown out twice now at home. Tennessee and Ole Miss have both killed them in the Yum Center. I think it's even worse now with Case and Pryor and Curran Johnson out. So Duke is just way more talented. Louisville doesn't have the personnel. Give me Duke by like 10 plus.
Yeah, if you were going to cook up the recipe for Louisville to win, I guess you would want to see some strong games from Terrence Edwards Jr. and Chucky Hepburn. You're going to kind of want those guys to carry the load and lead the way for you. Derb, are you on board with the Blue Devils here?
Absolutely. I don't think Louisville's got that dog in them.
Yeah, fair enough. Blake, do you agree with that? The dogless Cardinals?
Yeah, especially with Kayshawn Pryor out for the year now. I just don't see them really having anyone that matches up against Cooper Flagg well at all. And I mean, even Kaman Malawach, like, they don't have anyone that matches up like even closely well with those two. So I'm guessing those two go off in that game, even in front of the Yum fans. And I'm gonna have to go Duke over 15.
Mm-hmm. Do we think that Pat Kelsey's going to be roaming around Louisville's campus begging fans to come to the game for this one, or we think Ville Nation's going to show out regardless?
I don't know. It's not looking good for both.
Yeah, we may see Kelsey walking around the student union here on Louisville's Twitter in the next coming hours saying, "Are you coming out tonight? You coming out tonight?"
Just to get blown out.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Pat Kelsey. I mean,
He's trying. He's doing his best.
He inherited the absolute disaster that Kenny Payne left. One of the worst coaching jobs, I think, in Division I basketball history, arguably. But I just think that their injury problems right now is going to be a little too much. And the season as a whole, I think, for them, you're going to kind of have to reevaluate what your expectations are after you lose a guy that was really anchoring the front court there with Pryor.
Yeah,
I would assume everybody's in agreement with that. We may have to temper the expectations on Louisville a little bit moving forward.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I was a little excited, as you were, Luke, about Louisville this year. I mean, they had Pat Kelsey coming in, who kind of rejuvenated the program, I felt like. They had some big wins down at Battle for Atlantis. They beat up on IU, who was like number, I think, 14 at the time. Obviously, they're kind of on mid-watch right now, but yeah, I'm definitely not sold anymore in that Louisville team now that Kashawn Pryor and Corinne Johnson are both out.
Yeah, no, I mean, this team, it had the makeup of a team that could be pretty solid when you were looking at it in the offseason, but I mean, this is just what happens in college basketball. The injuries are going to happen to everybody, and you got to work with what you got, and it's going to be a challenge the rest of the way for Kelsey.
I mean, at least they still have Chucky Hepburn going in their favor. I mean, he's averaging almost four steals a game, like 15 points a game. Honestly, he might be up in the running for like one of the best, if not the best, two-way player in all of college basketball right now. Because, I mean, he's a dog on both sides of the floor. But, I mean, besides him, there's nobody really that, like, screams, like, good player on that team right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure I buy them as a tournament team anymore. I feel like those two losses are too big to overcome.
Yeah, I don't think I'm buying them as a tournament team either, Derb. Do you think that Louisville's still going to be able to at least achieve the tournament, or is that kind of a harder thing to accomplish now given recent circumstances?
I could see them sneaking in perhaps, but the two best teams they've played, they got absolutely punked by. And especially now that they've lost one of their better players, I don't see their ceiling being very good.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, that's not to slight Louisville or what Pat Kelsey's doing at all, because he's got them on the right track. And I mean, this roster, like we said, it had the makeup, but you know, as simply put, shit happens. So.
Yeah.
But before we part ways, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that tonight we have one standalone game, top 25 team in action. Illinois, number 19 team in the country, is taking on Northwestern. Illinois is only favored by 3.5 in this one, so Vegas is liking what they're seeing out of Northwestern here. I'm going with Illinois. Give me a big performance from Tomislav Ivicic and Will Riley. I think they get it done and start off conference play strong, and I'll throw that up to you boys for your predictions. Jake, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going Illinois. I don't think Northwestern has the playmakers to match up with Illinois that they do. I feel like Vegas is riding on Northwestern's home court advantage, but we'll see. I got Illinois.
How about you, Blake?
I mean, I think Northwestern's a sneaky team here. I mean, they got Brooks Barnheiser. He's been phenomenal this season. 20 a game. Nick Martinelli, he's been averaging 20 a game as well. And I mean, like, that core has been really good this year, but I still think Illinois wins by like 6 maybe. I feel like I agree with, I forget who said it. I kind of zoned out. Somebody said Tomislav Ivicic. I thought it was you, but I don't want to mistake myself.
Oh, you're good.
I think Tomislav has a big game. I feel like Will Riley, like, it has the makings of a big Will Riley game. And then, I mean, if Kasparis, I think is how you say it, he's got a big name. It's hard to pronounce it. But if he has another one of those games like he did against Arkansas, I mean, they just might be tough to beat.
Yeah, Derb, you can finish it off here. What say you?
Well, Illinois has actually got the good Evasich brother, so give me them.
Man, throwing some shade at Big Z. Coming out swinging.
I ain't got no beef against Big Z. It's just unless he's shooting a wide open three, he's below mid. So
That's fair. Well, boys, we've covered all of our bases here for this evening. Got us a nice recap of the game action we had through the week, and then we got this weekend slate to enjoy. I guess before we part ways, what's everybody's matchup they're looking forward to the most? I mean, for me personally, it's obviously Kentucky Gonzaga. I'm sure with Derb and Jake, they probably agree with that as well for the Kentucky homers on this podcast. But outside of that, I'm really excited for this UConn Texas game. Jake, what are some other games that you're going to have your eye
on? Honestly, Maryland and Purdue is one we kind of went under the radar on. Even though Purdue at home, Maryland has been pretty good this year. They have a good freshman, Derek Queen. Outside of that, I don't know. I like the Kentucky Gonzaga the most, obviously. I feel like that's objectively the best one this weekend.
yeah, for sure.
Texas Tech, Texas A&M will be pretty good. In-state rivals is always a good bet, so that's a good one I'm going for.
Yeah, for sure. Derb, what other games are you going to be keeping an eye out for?
Kentucky Gonzaga, obviously. I'm looking forward to Duke and Louisville. Looking forward to seeing the Cards getting ran out of their own home. Interested to see the Gonzaga Texas again. I know not Gonzaga Texas, UConn Texas. To see if UConn kind of continues their downward slide. You know, seeing if Dan Hurley can keep his composure for longer than 2 minutes at a time. You know, those are the two big ones for me, I suppose, or the three, whatever it was there.
Yeah, for sure. Blake, I'll let you finish it off. What are you going to be keeping your eye on this weekend?
I'll definitely be watching that Marquette-Wisconsin game. I feel like that has the makings of a really good game on Fox. And then also, obviously, the Gonzaga-Kentucky team, probably the best matchup of the weekend. I mean, that's just going to be a neck-and-neck battle between both teams. And then also, another really underrated game. We talked about it a bit, but Butler-Houston, I mean, being an Indiana citizen myself, I think I'll definitely be tuned in and see how the Butler Bulldogs do against a top 25 team in Houston who's been nothing but consistent lately.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of good games to keep an eye on. A nice, solid weekend of basketball. A lot of football games on as well for our college football junkies out there. But yeah, this has been a fun episode, boys. Jake, glad we got to have you on for your debut. I'm sure we'll be seeing you a little bit more from here on out.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Derb, that second appearance. I know you said you were looking to build on your performance. How you think you did, my man?
Dude, I dropped my iPad like 3 times, so I
hope you know we're leaving that in there for an authentic viewing experience. By the way,
listen,
we kept the show rolling even through the technical difficulties there.
Yeah, dude, okay, so I got it stacked up on these Zen cans, and I accidentally knocked it off, and it like fell backwards. I was like, "Oh fuck!"
Podcast sponsor Zen. Go ahead and give us your business. We'll promote you well.
You know, yeah. Because I have it raised up a little bit more, so that way it kind of keep the background clear. Yeah, and I accidentally hit it. And all of a sudden, I was sitting in the middle of talking. I see my computer go flying. And I'm like, oh, fuck.
I'm sure the viewers at the end of this podcast are going to be loving hearing Derb's setup story here. This is what we're here for, give top-notch basketball analysis with a little bit of a personal touch to it. Chills.
That's
Chills.
how real it is.
That really gets for the Rock.
Chills. That's what it's going to be when Kentucky beats the Zags this weekend, baby. Yes,
Oh,
sir.
God.
Cut a promo, yep.
C-A-T-S, cats. Breaking character, baby. Let's go. I'm picking Gonzaga, but I bleed blue till I die. This has been the Full Court Trap. We'll see y'all later on Sunday or Monday to recap everything.
Appreciate you guys.